Chapter 2701. The Huge Black Dragon Planet. It had 6 vast continents, a few 100 million miles of mountains and rivers, and 40 billion living beings. This used to be a place full of outstanding people, a prosperous world where martial arts flourished. However, the Heaven Punishers had occupied this world for 150 years. The Northern Field Marshal was there personally, commanding more than 50 captains and more than 6,000 Heaven Punishers to control the entire Black Dragon planet. They enslaved 1 billion martial artists and created 3 million elite puppets. In the past 150 years, they greedily seized resources and treasures. The Black Dragon planet had long been riddled with holes and countless heavenly treasures had been taken away. Until now, the Northern Field Marshal had left the Black Dragon planet in advance with the Heaven Punishers and brought away endless cultivation resources. He only left behind 3 million puppets whose divine souls were controlled to guard this world for the Heaven Punishers. This world was barren and full of devastation. In 2 months, Ji Tianqing and the others had traveled across 6 continents. Everywhere they went, the same scene was everywhere. The zombie-like puppets were still ordering the slaves to excavate mines and collect resources day and night. The slaves were busy on the plains, in the mountains, deep underground and at the bottom of the sea. When Ji Tianqing and the others encountered those puppets, the White Dragon and the 4 divine beasts wanted to use their divine powers to kill them on the spot. However, Ji Tianqing stopped them. The Northern Field Marshal had led the Heaven Punishers to leave the Black Dragon planet and temporarily give up on this world. They purposely left behind many puppets to help them maintain order on the Black Dragon planet. After the Heaven Punishers kill us, the Northern Field Marshal will return. By then, the Black Dragon planet will be in order, and they will soon regain control of this world. In order to prevent them from succeeding, not only can we not kill these puppets, but we also have to save them. Ji Tianqing explained the reason to the White Dragon and the 4 divine beasts. Then he released the white light of the sky-mending orb to purify the puppets. The Heaven Punishers' divine power in their divine souls was removed. Countless puppets regained their consciousness and woke up. They felt as if they had just woken up from a dream. After knowing what they had done, they all cried bitterly and blamed themselves. After all, they were once emperors and leaders of their respective races. After being controlled by the Heaven Punisher, they helped the Heaven Punisher oppress and enslave their people. This was a great humiliation and mistake. Many people were too ashamed to face the common people and wanted to commit suicide to atone for their sins. Ji Tianqing released a divine light to calm everyone down. Then he earnestly persuaded everyone to turn over a new leaf and lead the people to rebuild their homes and fight against the heavens together. Everyone suddenly came to their senses and knelt down to worship, thanking Ji Tianqing for saving their lives and giving them a new lease of life. Ji Tianqing was deeply gratified. Concealing his merit and fame, he brought the White Dragon and the 4 divine beasts and floated away. For 2 whole months this kind of thing happened every day. White Dragon and the 4 mythological beasts were bored and couldn't wait any longer. However, Ji Tianqing was never tired of it. He didn't feel tired even after running around every day. He was still in high spirits. White Dragon and the 4 divine beasts were puzzled. Under the instigation of the 4 divine beasts, White Dragon could only find an opportunity to secretly ask Ji Tianqing, "Master, Black Dragon planet is empty. We can't get any benefits here, nor can we kill the Heaven Punisher. Why are we wasting time? Moreover, it's useless for you to save those puppets. When the Heaven Punisher comes back, they will still be controlled and turned into puppets." In response to this, Ji Tianqing smiled and shook his head. He explained, "Why would Master do something that has no meaning? We don't have much time. Why would I waste it for no reason?" White Dragon was even more puzzled. "Then why are you wasting time with a bunch of ants? You don't understand." Ji Tianqing smiled mysteriously and said calmly, "I'm doing good deeds and collecting divine power." "Ah." White Dragon was stunned and said with a strange expression, "Master, you're not bald. Why do you believe in this?" White Dragon suddenly thought of a possibility and said with realization, "Could it be that you're collecting the power of faith from all living beings? But I've never seen you cultivate the path of faith." Ji Tianqing rolled his eyes and said unhappily, "The path of faith is a heretical path among the 3,000 great paths. Unless I have no other choice, I don't want to use it." Seeing that White Dragon was still confused and wanted to get to the bottom of it, Ji Tianqing was annoyed and could only tell him the truth. Alright, since you're so stupid, I'll tell you the truth. Many years ago, when I was still in the Tianxian continent, I obtained a heaven-mending pearl by chance. It was the ultimate treasure of an almighty in the god realm in the ancient times. The gods borrowed it to mend the sky. Ji Tianqing briefly introduced the origin and power of the heaven-mending pearl. White Dragon was very interested and asked expectantly, "You used the power of the heaven-mending pearl to save those puppets?" Of course. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "Ever since I reached the peak of the true god realm, I refined many stars and absorbed vast amounts of resources for the 5 elemental world. Now my strength has increased by 20 times, and I've reached the half-step god realm. The heaven-mending pearl has been sleeping for many years and has only recently awakened, but it has undergone a huge change. Like a dusty pearl that has regained its brilliance, a divine dragon hidden in the abyss has soared to the 9 heavens. In short, the current heaven-mending pearl is gradually showing the brilliance of a supreme divine item. When I saved those puppets, I used up a little of the heaven-mending pearl's power. However, the heaven-mending pearl collected a large amount of mysterious power from those people." White Dragon's blood surged when he heard this. He asked excitedly, "What power? What effect does it have?" "The effect of reviving the dead and regrowing flesh and bones," Ji Tianqing said with a smile. "Let's call it a life-saving divine light for the time being." "Is it so magical?" White Dragon was even more surprised. His eyes turned and locked onto a certain foreign race martial saint kneeling on the ground in the city under his feet. Without saying a word, he raised his hand and slapped that martial saint to death. Then he carried the broken corpse in front of Ji Tianqing and said with a sneaky smile, "Master, why don't you show it to me and broaden my horizons?" Ji Tianqing's face darkened. The 4 divine beasts were also dumbfounded. In the square in the middle of the city, dozens of foreign race experts and more than 200,000 slaves were so scared that they kept quiet out of fear. Everyone was filled with fear. They were afraid that the temperamental gods would slap them all to death. Everyone's psychological shadow was even bigger than their faces. Ji Tianqing glared at White Dragon. Then he stretched out his right hand and flicked out a ray of milky white divine light. Swoosh! The divine light covered the unlucky martial saint's corpse and turned it into a dense ball of light. In the next moment, the mangled corpse recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye. After a short 10 breaths, the corpse returned to its original state, and its pulse and heartbeat recovered. That unlucky martial saint coughed twice and gradually opened his eyes. He woke up with a confused expression. "Come, wonderful book house. Come." Chapter 2702. Where is this? What happened just now? The unlucky martial saint scratched his head and looked around with a blank expression. He only remembered that he was kneeling in the square, kowtowing and thanking the god for saving his life. All of a sudden a black shadow descended, and he lost consciousness. When he woke up, he found himself lying in the sky. 10 steps in front of him was the white-robed god and 4 mountain-sized divine beasts. The unlucky martial saint reacted and hurriedly knelt on the ground, kowtowing in fear and trepidation. "Please forgive me, Lord God. I was confused and didn't know how I came here. I didn't mean to offend you, Lord God. Please punish me." The unlucky martial saint didn't know what had happened and was afraid that he had offended the god's dignity and angered him. Seeing this scene, not only the White Dragon and the 4 divine beasts were surprised. Even the dozens of powerhouses and more than 200,000 slaves in the city revealed looks of disbelief as they let out cries of surprise. Everyone thought that they were seeing things and couldn't believe it. The unlucky martial saint had been slapped to death and his body had turned into a pile of minced meat. In the blink of an eye, he came back to life and returned to his original state. This was simply a miracle. No, this was a miracle. Only the god of the 9 heavens had such earth-shattering methods and opportunities. For a moment, all the martial artists and commoners in the city were inexplicably shocked. They knelt on the ground and kowtowed crazily. "The god has shown himself. A miracle, we saw a miracle. The god has descended to the mortal world and saved millions of lives. This is all of our good fortune. To be able to see a miracle with my own eyes in this life. I will have no regrets even if I die." Hundreds of thousands of martial artists and commoners were so excited that their blood was boiling, and they shouted themselves hoarse. All the commoners in the city were carried away, and worshipped Ji Tianqing devoutly and fanatically. Invisibly, thousands of white streams of air converged into the heaven-mending pearl. After a while, the life-saving divine light consumed by the heaven-mending pearl was completely replenished. After 10 breaths, the life-saving divine light accumulated in the heaven-mending pearl had increased by 3 times. And it was still increasing. Ji Tianqing was a little surprised by this outcome. He glanced at the white dragon with a faint smile. Bai Long revealed a sly smile and asked, "Master, did the heaven-mending orb collect double the amount of life-saving divine light? This effect is not bad, right? Look at those cultivators and commoners. How devoutly they worship you." Ji Tianqing did not say much. He waved his hand and shot out a ray of divine light, sending that unlucky martial sage back to the city. Then he turned around and left with White Dragon and the 4 divine beasts. Hundreds of thousands of martial practitioners and commoners respectfully watched them leave. They knelt on the ground for a long time before getting up. After a short while, the unlucky martial saint asked someone and finally understood what had happened. He was both scared and excited, and a strong sense of pride grew in his heart. After all, to be able to be slapped to death by a deity and then brought back to life was a great honor. After he calmed down, he quickly checked his body to see if there were any residual effects. In the end, he discovered that his strength had risen by 3 realms out of nowhere. Moreover, the hidden injuries that had accumulated in his body for many years had all disappeared without a trace. Even his physique and talent had been greatly improved. Originally, he was only a rank 4 martial sage. Now he had reached the rank 7 martial sage realm. Moreover, it was as if he had been reborn. His talent had greatly increased and he even had the chance to break through to the martial god realm. Such a shocking outcome caused him to tremble in excitement and tears filled his eyes. He could not hold back his joy and announced this great surprise to the public. Soon, the news spread throughout the square and over 200,000 people knew about it. Many martial practitioners and commoners were once again shocked and their blood boiled. Their worship and respect for Ji Tianqing had reached the limit. In less than 2 hours, the news had spread throughout the city. More than 1 million martial practitioners and commoners knew about the deity's descent and the miracle. Thus, the entire city fell into a state of surprise and madness. Everyone prostrated themselves in worship of Ji Tianqing. The martial sage who had profited from the disaster even wanted to build a temple in the city for the commoners to worship Ji Tianqing. After Ji Tianqing left the city, he rushed to the next main city to purify the puppets that were controlled by the heaven-punishing tribe. Along the way, he could clearly feel that the power of the heaven-repairing pearl was still increasing. The life-saving divine light in the divine pearl was growing at an extremely fast rate. Half a day later, the life-saving light increased by 9 times before it gradually stopped. At this time he rescued a large number of heaven-punishing puppets in an even more majestic main city. Thus, over 100 puppets and 300,000 slaves prostrated themselves before him. Bai Long had nothing to do and killed a young martial sage in front of everyone. He sent the smashed corpse in front of Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing was speechless. He had no choice but to release a ray of life-saving light to save the young martial sage. What happened next was exactly the same as before. Hundreds of thousands of martial practitioners who were inexplicably terrified found that the young martial sage had come back to life. They were extremely surprised and shocked. Chapter 2703. As the saying goes, what you lose on the swings you gain on the roundabouts. Ji Tianqing and the others had killed their way into the Black Dragon planet and failed to kill Marshal Jinbei and seize a huge amount of cultivation resources. However, he had saved more than 2 million puppets and returned the Black Dragon planet to normal, temporarily leaving the Heaven Punisher's rule. Moreover, the power of his heaven-mending orb had increased by dozens of times, and he had also obtained a huge amount of life-saving divine light. Such a bountiful harvest was no less than killing Marshal Jinbei. After leaving the Black Dragon planet, Ji Tianqing and the others returned to the 5 Elements world. A year ago, Yunyao had sent him a message. She asked him about the specific situation, why it took so long, and whether he had encountered any trouble. After all, according to past practice, Ji Tianqing only needed a little more than a month to save a world. At most, it would take him no more than 3 months. Ji Tianqing sent a message back to Yunyao and explained the reason. After returning to the Five Elements world, he drove it and continued to travel in the void. As time passed, the Five Elements world passed by one world after another. Most of the worlds had already been emptied. The Heaven Punisher fleet guarding the worlds had already plundered a huge amount of resources and left in advance. There were many puppets controlled by the Heaven Punisher left in the worlds. They were still loyal and helping the Heaven Punisher control the entire world. After entering these worlds, Ji Tianqing spent a lot of time purifying most of the puppets. Therefore, he was worshipped by billions of people and obtained a huge amount of life-saving divine light. The power of the heaven-mending orb was also increasing. Only a small number of worlds still had the Heaven Punisher fleet remaining to control the people and martial artists of various races. Ji Tianqing and the others killed their way into these worlds, killed countless Heaven Punishers, and saved the entire world. This also allowed him to obtain a lot of life-saving divine light, and the power of the heaven-mending orb also increased. However, compared to purifying those Heaven Punisher puppets, the life-saving divine light he obtained was not much, but it was better than nothing. In the blink of an eye, 12 years had passed. The Five Elements world left the Black Dragon Star Zone and was about to enter the Fangang Star Zone. In the more than 20 years in the Black Dragon Star Zone, the Five Elements world traveled in a straight line and saved hundreds of worlds along the way. Although there were 300 worlds in the Black Dragon Star Zone, Ji Tianqing and the others had only managed to rescue 1/3 of them. However, they had slaughtered more than 200,000 soldiers of the Heaven-conquering army, forcing the Northern Marshal to lead a large number of soldiers to retreat. This was equivalent to saving the Black Dragon Star Zone, allowing most of the worlds to regain their freedom. Of course, as long as the Heaven Punishers were not destroyed, the Northern Expedition fleet might come back. Many worlds still had a large number of puppets. Once the Heaven Punishers returned, they would quickly regain control of the worlds. Only by completely wiping out the Heaven Punishers could they solve the problem once and for all. After leaving the Black Dragon Star Zone, the Five Elements realm flew toward the Fangang Star Zone at the speed of light. Between the two star areas, there were two magnificent galaxies that were billions of miles long. Tens of millions of stars of different sizes floated quietly in the galaxy, flashing with dazzling brilliance. Nearly 99% of the stars were barren, devoid of life. However, the stars contained incomparably rich ores, gems, and various other resources. For example, the Divine Star Fire, Divine Void Light, Annihilation Zidian, and so on were all special divine power resources. Although there were living beings on a very small number of stars, they were all powerful individual life forms. For example, there were the star beasts that traversed the universe, nibbling on stars to absorb energy, and the mysterious void realm beasts. Even ordinary martial gods did not dare to provoke those powerful beings. They could easily lose their lives in the void. When passing by the first galaxy, the Five Elements realm stopped. Ji Tianqing picked more than 30 stars that were rich in resources and ores. He refined and devoured them one by one. He had wasted 6 years because of this. However, after the Five Elements realm devoured many stars, its size grew by 40%, and its strength increased by more than 10 times. This also caused Ji Tianqing's strength to skyrocket. It was now 50 times that of a peak true god. Currently, due to the restriction of the Heavenly Ways rules, he could only be considered a half-step heavenly god. However, in reality, his true combat strength was already comparable to a level 2 heavenly god. There was no other person with such a powerful foundation in the entire universe, even if one searched through all 3,000 worlds. When passing by the second galaxy, the Five Elements realm was in great danger. In the dazzling galaxy, not only were there terrifying void storms, divine flames, and annihilation Zidian, but there were also folded spaces. There were even more than a dozen black holes hidden in the galaxy. The situation was too dangerous. Ji Tianqing could not take the risk of bringing the entire realm with him. Therefore, he had to maneuver the Five Elements realm to change its direction and go around the galaxy. A year later, the Five Elements realm flew into the Fangang Star Zone. The void in front of them became quiet. Many worlds with dazzling divine lights appeared. The five elements realm quietly approached those stars. Ji Tianqing and the others steered the battleships and sneaked into those worlds to kill the Heaven Punishers. When the Northern Field Marshal had led the soldiers to retreat from the Black Dragon Star Zone, Ji Tianqing and the others were alarmed. In their opinion, the Heaven Punisher had already made the necessary preparations and precautions. The Western Expedition Fleet guarding the Fangang Star Zone must have retreated to the Heaven Punisher planet. The Heaven Punisher might have gathered his strongest forces and set up a killing array on the Heaven Punisher planet, waiting for everyone to die. However, the Fangang Star Zone was very peaceful. They searched more than a dozen worlds, and there were Heaven Punisher battleships guarding them. This made everyone let down their guard. They were immersed in the excitement of killing the Heaven Punishers and plundering a large amount of resources. Soon 8 years passed. They saved more than 30 worlds, killed thousands of Heaven Punisher battleships and 100,000 Heaven Punisher soldiers. At the same time, Ji Tianqing also purified tens of millions of puppets and obtained millions of life-saving divine lights. The Heaven Mending Orb's power had also increased by 100 times. It had reached a mysterious level. Ji Tianqing also benefited greatly. His power had increased by another 30 times. He was now 80 times stronger than when he was at the peak of the true immortal stage. He estimated that he was even more powerful than the Heaven Punisher Stage 3 gods from the upper world. Such a terrifying power filled him with confidence. He was looking forward to the day he could reach the Heaven Punisher planet and fight the Heaven Punisher Emperor. He was looking forward to ascending to the Divine Realm after killing the Heaven Punishers. Without the restriction of the Heavenly Way, he would instantly break through the Heaven Punisher stage and soar to the Heaven Punisher Stage 3. Meanwhile, the Five Elements world was flying in the void. A few 100 million miles ahead was the core of the entire star zone, the Fangang Star Zone. Jiku Bai Long and the four divine beasts were looking forward to it. However, Yunyao frowned. She looked like she was deep in thought. Ji Tianqing saw a hint of worry in her eyes. He asked, Yao Yao, what are you thinking about? Yunyao's thoughts were interrupted. After a moment of silence, she said, Tianqing, I have a bad feeling. The Fangang star ahead is very dangerous. Chapter 2704. Yunyao was very sensitive to all kinds of auras. This was an innate talent she was born with. As Goddess Yao Guang's memories continued to awaken, her strength increased rapidly. At the same time, she also gave birth to some mysterious divine abilities and indescribable abilities. For example, her sixth sense was far superior to ordinary true gods. She could often see the past and future, as well as some special scenes in other dimensions. Before this, there were many times when she was depressed. Ji Tianqing asked her why, but she often refused to tell him. Later, the situation became more and more serious. Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku, and the two children were all very worried about her. Only then did she tell them the reason. It was because she had seen the scene of everyone fighting on planet Heaven Punisher a few decades later. She saw mountains collapse, rivers stop flowing, and the sky collapse. Billions of divine flames and lightning poured down and destroyed the entire world. Billions of Heaven Punishers were turned to dust. The entire planet was in a terrible situation. It was almost destroyed. When they heard this, Ji Tianqing and the others were confused. They smiled and said, Isn't this a good omen? It means that we will definitely destroy the Heaven Punisher and achieve great victory. However, Yunyao shook her head and said solemnly, No. Not only did the Heaven Punisher turn to dust, but we also suffered great losses and were about to be separated by life and death. I saw Tianqing's body shatter. His flesh and blood scattered between heaven and earth. He was burned to ashes by divine flames. I also saw the four divine beasts being torn to pieces. Their divine blood spilled across the sky. Our children, Chan Chan and Yaya, were also seriously injured and on the verge of death. They disappeared without a trace. When Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku, and the others heard this, their smiles froze. Everyone tried to persuade and comfort her patiently. Yao Yao, how could great Emperor Heaven Punisher, Heaven's Pivot, and the Empress defeat us? I have merged with the Five Elements world. Who can kill me? I will also protect our children. I will not let any harm come to them. Eldest senior sister, don't think too much. These are all baseless guesses. With our current strength, who can do anything to us? Mistress, it's precisely because you're too worried that you've fallen ill from worry that you've given birth to these false fantasies. You must calm your mind and have a good rest for a period of time. Mother, we are true gods now. Even if we can't defeat Emperor Heaven Punisher and Tianshu, we can still protect ourselves. Don't worry about us. Ji Tianxing, Ji Ku Bailong, and the two children were all trying to persuade Yunyao. However, Yunyao was stubborn and did not dispel her worries. Her eyes were clear and resolute as she stared into the void. Her voice trembled as she said, I really can see the future. You have to believe me. We were not the ones who caused that tragedy, nor were we the Heaven Punisher race. Instead, it's an incomparably huge palm in the sky that's shrouded in bloody light. Hearing this, Ji Tianxing immediately understood what she meant, and flatly denied it. Oh, you're worrying too much and you're worrying too much. I understand what you mean. The upper realm deities will interfere with our war, and destroy the entire Heaven Punisher planet. Is that right? However, don't forget that the heavenly axiom has restrictions. The deities of the heavenly realm and the dragon realm can't descend to the mortal world, much less interfere with the mortal world's affairs. Even when I reached the peak of the godly king stage, I couldn't interfere with the mortal world's affairs. Yunyao was speechless. She could only remain silent. Everyone tried to persuade her for a while and then dispersed. Later, everyone was busy saving the various worlds. They were immersed in the excitement of killing the Heaven Punisher race and plundering cultivation resources. They had forgotten about this matter. Yunyao did not mention the scene she had seen. Everyone pretended that it had never happened. Now, they were about to arrive at the Fanggang planet. Yunyao looked worried and uneasy again. Ji Tianxing held her hands, and with a smile on his face he said gently, Yao, why are you worried about us again? We've been in the Fanggang planet zone for 8 years, and everything has been smooth sailing. We haven't encountered any danger. Even if the Western Expedition Fleet is guarding the Fanggang planet and has gathered 100,000 soldiers here, they won't be able to threaten us. Yunyao shook her head gently. Of course it's not the Western Expedition Fleet. How can those useless people harm us? What I saw was countless godly-level powerhouses gathering here, and setting up an inescapable trap for us. Countless godly-level powerhouses? Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, all right, then let's assume that the Heaven Punisher Emperor is here with the 3 great marshals and 100,000 Heaven Punishers to ambush us. Even so, we have nothing to fear. The current Heaven Punisher race had almost no powerhouses left. The left and right protectors, the Imperial Tutor, the Southern Expedition Marshals, and the Eastern Expedition Marshals had all been killed by Ji Tianxing. Crown Prince Tianshu had also been severely injured and was on the verge of death. It was likely that he had not fully recovered yet. The only true god powerhouses who could be ranked were the Heaven Punisher Emperor, Empress Yun Shuoyan, and the 3 great marshals. Therefore, Ji Tianxing and the others were not afraid at all. They were not worried at all. Yunyao hesitated for a moment and swallowed her words. She looked at Ji Tianxing with a determined gaze and said, Tianxing, I want to accompany you to the Fanggang planet. Ji Tianxing rejected her without hesitation. Yao, I'll only bring Ku the White Dragon, and the 4 divine beasts this time. Chanshan and Yaya have both reached the 4th level of the True God Realm, and are cultivating in seclusion to reach the 5th level of the True God Realm. It's better for you to stay. You can take care of the 2 children and monitor the 5 elements world to prevent any accidents. Yunyao's attitude was very firm. She insisted on going with Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing could not persuade her, so he had to change his mind. He nodded and said, all right, we'll do as you say. Ku will stay behind to guard the 5 elements world. Seeing that he agreed, Yunyao heaved a sigh of relief. Unknowingly, 2 months had passed. The 5 elements world gradually slowed down and stopped 200 million miles away from the Fanggang planet. Looking from 200 million miles away, one could see that the Fanggang planet with a diameter of 700 million miles was enveloped by a layer of silver divine light. On the divine light barrier, one could vaguely see thousands of golden special patterns. They looked like the language of a certain race, but also like the oracle of the upper realm deities. It was very mysterious. Ji Tianxing knew that it was the language of the Brahmin tribe from the ancient times. The Brahmin tribe cultivated the Brahmin divine path. It was one of the more special paths among the 3,000 great paths. Those without the Brahmin tribe bloodline could not cultivate it. The Brahmin divine path had a mysterious and unpredictable power. It had a majestic righteousness that was close to the heavenly thunder. However, the pure-blooded descendants of the Brahmin tribe had long disappeared. The bloodlines of countless descendants of the Brahmin tribe had been diluted by other races and were scattered on many stars in the Fanggang galaxy. Ji Tianqing asked Ji Ku to stay behind. He brought Yunniao, the white dragon, and the 4 divine beasts with him and flew toward the Fanggang planet on the warship. Chapter 2705. Swoosh. The Tianqing battleship flew toward the Fanggang star like a black phantom. However, the 5 elements world was 200 million miles away from the Fanggang star. The Tianqing battleship would need at least 10 days to get there. Along the way, the white dragon and the 4 divine beasts chatted. They fantasized about how many troops the West Expedition Fleet had gathered on the Fanggang star, and how many resources they had plundered. Yunniao stood beside Ji Tianqing and stared at the Fanggang star calmly. After a long time she couldn't help but ask, "Tianqing, isn't the divine light barrier of the Fanggang star also formed by the heavenly Tao? Why are there countless Sanskrit markings and patterns on the silver barrier?" Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and explained with a smile, "I haven't studied this question, so I'm not too sure. However, I'm guessing that countless Brahmins have cultivated the Fanggang martial path and the divine path, forming a powerful special force that caused the divine light barrier to change. Or maybe there were heavenly gods or divine lords on the Fanggang star in ancient times. Only an expert of this level can add a mark on the divine light barrier to increase its defensive power." Yunniao nodded slightly and continued to ask, "What's so special about the Brahmins and the Fanggang divine path?" Ji Tianqing smiled playfully and said, "I haven't seen a pure-blooded Brahmin with my own eyes, but I've collected some useful information from the various worlds in the Fanggang star field. It's said that the pure-blooded Brahmins look a little like humans. However, the Brahmins are very tall and strong, and both men and women are bald. They have very little body hair, probably only 2 eyebrows, and not even eyelashes. Moreover, the Brahmins have rings of golden patterns on their heads, representing different strength realms and status. The stronger and higher the status, the more golden patterns on their heads. A martial god realm expert would have 8 golden rings above his head. The most powerful true god experts will have 9 rings of golden patterns on their heads." Yunniao nodded and listened attentively. Ji Tianqing paused for a moment before continuing. The Brahma clan cultivates the Brahma astral divine path, which focuses on cultivating the body and the soul. They disdained to use weapons and armors because their own defense and strength were far stronger than weapons and armors of the same level. Even an ordinary warrior could cultivate an indestructible Vajra body. At the same time, the Brahma race's divine soul was extraordinarily powerful. They could cast many divine soul and mind divine abilities in secret arts. When cultivating one's soul, the most commonly used cultivation method was to sit in meditation. The bloodline of the Brahma clan was very ancient. It could be traced back to the beginning of ancient times. Therefore, they maintained a strong belief in their race. It was said that they worshipped the Vajra war god of the upper realm and worshipped physical strength and the power of the soul. In the ancient legends, the supreme Vajra war god destroyed the stars with his fists and feet, severed the Milky Way, and created the perfect eternal kingdom with his miraculous and boundless spiritual power. After Yunniao finished listening, she nodded her head and said, "If the Vajra battle god really exists, then he should also be a peak divine king. Moreover, he should be the most special existence among the peak divine kings." Ji Tianqing chuckled and said, "I don't know about that. Anyway, 1,100 years ago, when I was still in the god realm, I had never heard of such a person. If the Vajra battle god really exists, I'm afraid he's also an almighty from the beginning of ancient times." Yunniao nodded her head in agreement and said no more. 10 days passed in a flash. The Tianqing battleship crossed 200 million miles of void and arrived at the Brahma star. As soon as the battleship landed on the silver light barrier, a golden Sanskrit imprint with a radius of 10,000 miles bloomed with dazzling golden light. Bam! With a muffled explosion, the powerful golden light swept over and blasted the Tianqing battleship away. The battleship rolled and flew a few hundred miles before it fell into the void. Fortunately, the battleship's quality had reached the heavenly god level, and it was not damaged. Ji Tianqing, Yunniao, and Bai Long all frowned. Their eyes became serious. That's strange. The divine light barrier attacked on its own? We've crossed 3 star zones and saved hundreds of worlds, but we've never encountered such a thing. This Brahma star is really strange. Could it be the West conquering marshal's doing? The 3 of them and the 4 divine beasts were suspicious and alert. Bai Long, you stay in the battleship. We'll go out and check the situation. Ji Tianqing instructed and handed the control of the battleship to Bai Long. Then he left the battleship with Yunniao and the 4 divine beasts and flew near the silver light barrier. He used the God's Eye secret skill and stared at the silver light barrier, carefully observing it. The silver light barrier was very thick, and it contained a vigorous heavenly Tao divine power and an ancient aura. After a full hour, Ji Tianqing finally saw through the silver light barrier. He suddenly realized that other than the heavenly god level energy, there were also thousands of formation veins hidden in the silver light barrier. This made him immediately realize that the silver light barrier had been tampered with. I knew it. There are many divine formations set up in the Brahma star barrier. Not only is its defense strong, but it can also release powerful attacks. Ji Tianqing stared coldly at the Brahma star barrier. His entire body was filled with a strong desire to fight. It seems like the Heaven Punishers have spent a lot of effort to guard the Brahma star barrier. While Ji Tianqing was investigating the silver light barrier, Yunniao was also using her divine skill to investigate the energy in the barrier. Suddenly, she frowned and reminded in a low voice, Tianqing, not only is there a strong Heaven Punisher's divine power in the silver light barrier, there's also a violent and strong divine power aura. That kind of strong and explosive divine power is very similar to the Brahma star divine power that you mentioned. Ji Tianqing asked in confusion, do you mean that not only are there Heaven Punishers guarding this place, but there's also a Brahma tribe divine spirit who cultivates the Brahma star divine path? No. There are many Brahma runes on the silver light barrier. It contains the Brahma star divine power. Just as the 2 of them were confused and discussing it, the silver light barrier around them suddenly lit up with purple and golden light that soared into the sky. Whoosh! 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 At least a few million rays of purple and golden light shot out of the silver light barrier and bloomed in the air. They looked like millions of light ribbons or the veins of a spirit array. As the divine light appeared, an incomparably heavy power that suppressed the heavens and the earth silently pressed down. Whoosh! In just 2 short breaths, the 8 million rays of divine light had condensed into an enormous and terrifying light shield above the silver light barrier. The light shield, which had a radius of 100,000 miles, was made up of purple and golden light. It was like an inverted bowl that covered the silver light barrier. There was no doubt that this was an earth-shattering super spirit array. Ji Tianqing, Yunniao, and the others were trapped in this area by this super spirit array. We've never seen such a huge spirit array before. This must be at least 100,000 miles wide, right? This is indeed the Heaven Punisher's ambush. We've fallen into their trap after all. Don't worry. No matter what danger there is, I'm confident that I can get everyone out of here. Chapter 2706. The White Dragon and the 4 divine beasts were all amazed by the size of the divine formation. Yunniao also gripped the Source Stone divine sword tightly. A look of worry flashed across her eyes. Only Ji Tianqing's expression remained the same. He did not panic and even tried to calm everyone down. Although this divine formation with a radius of 100,000 miles had reached the heavenly god grade and was very powerful, he still had many trump cards. No matter what the situation was, he was confident that he could protect everyone. Since the divine formation has trapped us, it's time for the mastermind to appear. I'd like to see who it is that has the means to tamper with the divine light barrier. Ji Tianqing stood in the void with his clothes fluttering in the wind. He sneered and shouted in a low voice. As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd fell silent. Dozens of dazzling golden lights suddenly lit up in the divine formation. Swoosh! 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 In the blink of an eye, 81 golden light pillars appeared in all directions. When the dazzling golden light faded, 81 figures that were thousands of feet tall and looked like mountains appeared around everyone. Ji Tianqing, Yuniao, and the others all narrowed their eyes and sized up those huge figures. They saw that they were thousands of feet tall golden giants that looked like mountains. Every giant was completely golden, as if they were made of gold. Their bodies were similar to humans, but their bodies were abnormally strong and majestic. The muscles on their limbs and bodies bulged like mountains. Their wide and thick feet stepped heavily on the silver light barrier. Every step they took made a deafening sound. They were all bare-chested, revealing their broad and majestic chests. On their square and dignified faces, a pair of purple eyes exuded a murderous aura. Most importantly, the 81 golden giants were all bald. On their bald heads, there were 9 rings of dark golden patterns that shone brightly. Yuniao immediately frowned when she saw this. Bald? 9 rings of golden patterns? Tianqing, aren't these the true gods of the Brahma clan that you said cultivated the Brahma astral divine path? Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows in confusion and said, on the surface, those 81 giants are indeed the true gods of the Brahma clan. But that was impossible. Nowadays, pure-blooded Brahmins who cultivated the Brahma astral divine path were as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. The number of Brahma clan members who could reach the true divinity realm could be counted on one hand. How could 81 true divinities suddenly appear? Aside from the Heaven Punisher tribe, which other tribe has so many true gods? White Dragon suddenly thought of something and hurriedly shouted, I understand. Master's wife, this is definitely the doing of the Heaven Punisher race. Those giants aren't the true gods of the Brahma race. They must be puppets created by the Heaven Punishers. Puppet? Ji Tianqing and Yuniao's eyes lit up as they came to a sudden realization. The two of them released their divine senses to investigate the strength and aura of those golden giants. Soon they had a result. They are all made of flesh and blood. They are gods with the bloodline of the Brahmin. They are not low-grade puppets made of metal. The strength of these giants is between the 2nd and 4th level of the true divinity realm. Their eyes are purple, and they have the divine power of the Heaven Punisher race in their bodies. It is obvious that their divine souls have been controlled and their minds have been blinded. White Dragon immediately smiled and announced the result. I knew it. These giants are puppets created by the Heaven Punisher race to deal with us. Yuniao nodded. She still had some doubts as she said, these giants have the bloodline of the Brahmin and have cultivated the Brahma astral divine path. Their bodies are very strong. However, I am very curious. Where did the Heaven Punisher race find so many true gods of the Brahmin? Ji Tianqing did not answer. He looked coldly into the sky and said with a cold smile, the master is here. We will know the answer soon. Yuniao, White Dragon, and the 4 divine beasts followed his gaze and looked into the sky. They saw a dazzling purple light fly out of the Brahma astral star. It crossed the cold sky and headed toward the group. Swoosh! In just a few breaths of time, the dazzling purple light arrived above the 100,000-kilometer-wide formation and stopped above everyone's heads. After the purple light disappeared, a blackish-purple battleship that was 3,000 feet long appeared. This was obviously the Heaven Punisher race's battleship, and it was a supreme-grade true divinity realm battleship. Its appearance was as ferocious and domineering as before. It was like a fierce black and purple dragon with its claws and fangs. There were more than 300 black cannons on both sides of the battleship. There were also 2 main cannons that looked like whirlpools in the purple dragon, head at the front of the battleship. One could imagine that once the battleship fired its cannons, its power would be shocking. Crack, 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 crack. As the heavy sound of metal grinding could be heard, the battleship's huge hatch opened. A tall and sturdy figure stepped out of the cabin door. It was a powerful middle-aged Heaven Punisher man who was 10 feet tall. His upper body was similar to a human's, and his arms were thick and muscular. His face was majestic and domineering. He had a head full of purple hair and wore a 9 heavens everlasting crimson gold crown. A wide dark golden cape was draped over his shoulders. His lower body was like that of a dragon horse. He had 4 hooves and a dragon tail that shone with golden light. Ji Tianqing recognized him immediately. He was the Heaven Punisher Great Emperor. The Heaven Punisher Great Emperor has recovered from his injuries. He even came to the Fonggang planet personally. No wonder. Ji Tianqing was enlightened. He immediately guessed that the Heaven Punisher Great Emperor must have created the Heaven Punisher Great Emperor and the 81 giant puppets. As the Heaven Punisher Great Emperor walked to the front of the battleship, 3 tall and muscular figures walked out of the hatch. They were 3 muscular men. Although they were of different shapes and sizes, they were all wearing armor and gorgeous cloaks. They were all at LV6 true immortal realm and exuded the majestic aura of a superior being. Ji Tianqing knew immediately that the 3 of them were the 3 surviving marshals under the Heaven Punisher Great Emperor's command: the Northern Marshal, the Western Marshal, and the Protector Marshal. Other than the 3 marshals, over 100 Heaven Punishers clad in golden armor walked out of the cabin door one after another. These people were the generals of the various fleets. They commanded many battleships and were more powerful than the captains. Ji Tianqing scanned them with his divine senses and realized that the most powerful person was at LV4 True Immortal Realm. The weakest person was at LV1 True Immortal Realm. The Heaven Punisher Great Emperor stood proudly on the dragon's head at the front of the battleship. The 3 marshals stood behind him. Behind the 3 marshals, hundreds of golden armored generals were lined up neatly on the deck. They exuded a majestic aura. With such a luxurious lineup and more than 100 true immortal realm experts, they could sweep across the void and crush the 3,000 worlds. Together with the 81 true immortal realm giant puppets in the Heaven Punisher Great Emperor's array, the Heaven Punisher tribe's power was unprecedented. There was a great disparity in strength and numbers between the 2 sides. No matter how one looked at it, Ji Tianqing and the others did not have a chance of winning. The following battle was bound to be extremely tragic. In fact, it was very likely that they would lose their lives here. The Heaven Punisher Great Emperor thought so too. He looked down at Ji Tianqing and the others and smiled confidently. Ji Tianqing, how have you been? We meet again. Chapter 2707. The Great Emperor of Heaven Punisher's confident and mocking smile was very unpleasant to look at. Yunyao, Bai Long, and the 4 divine beasts were all on their guard. They stared at him warily. Ji Tianqing looked calm. His eyes were full of confidence. He said even more mockingly, "That's right. So soon we meet again. It seems that you have recovered from your injuries. Isn't this what they say? You forget the pain when the wound is healed. Didn't I teach you a lesson back then? Now you're asking to be tortured?" Hearing that, the 3 marshals and the hundreds of generals of Heaven Punisher frowned. Their faces were filled with anger. The Great Emperor of Heaven Punisher's face darkened. He shouted angrily, "Ji Tianqing, today you are trapped in the heaven-destroying formation that I have carefully set up. There are 81 Vajra war gods here. I have also gathered hundreds of powerful cultivators. I will kill you here and cut you into pieces. Under such circumstances, I don't understand how you can be so arrogant. Maybe you know that you are going to die, so you want to talk before you die?" Hearing that, the hundreds of generals of Heaven Punisher in golden armor sneered. Ji Tianqing was not angry. Instead, he said with a mocking smile, "That's why I said that this is the difference between the weak and the strong. You thought that you had planned for so many years and set up such an inescapable trap. You thought that you were confident. I recklessly barged into the Fan Gang Star and fell into your trap. That made you even more proud and confident. But you never knew that I had already guessed your next step when we were in the Black Dragon Star area. I saw through your scheme. I just didn't want to expose it. So, I came to the Fan Gang Star with my own scheme. After all, I didn't care about your petty tricks at all. Furthermore, I had to successfully enter your ambush to lure you out." Ji Tianqing said calmly. He told the whole story clearly. The Great Emperor of Heaven Punisher's plan was completely exposed. His face turned as cold as ice and his eyes shone with a fierce light. "Bullshit. You're spouting nonsense." The lofty martial Emperor Tianfa cursed out of anger. However, he quickly calmed down and sneered with a ferocious expression. "So what if you have guessed my plan? This wasn't a conspiracy in the first place but an overt one. In the end, didn't you still step into this Emperor's heaven-destroying great formation and get surrounded? No matter what you say, it's useless. I want to see how you're going to escape." As he spoke, Great Emperor Tianfa waved his hand and gave the order. The 3 marshals immediately released dazzling purple divine light. injecting it into the heaven-destroying formation. All of a sudden, the 100,000 miles great array started absorbing the silver light barrier's energy madly. It sped up its operation and emitted an even more dazzling radiance. Buzz! Within the formation, purple light descended from the heavens, releasing a destructive divine power that ruthlessly suppressed Ji Tianqing and the others. Under the tremendous pressure, the white dragon and the 4 divine beasts could not use their divine power smoothly. Their bodies were also slightly sluggish and stiff, and it was difficult for them to move. However, the 81 Brahmin tribe giants were not affected at all. Their auras were still as violent as ever. Ji Tianqing was calm as usual. He laughed mockingly and said, "Ha! Great Emperor Tianfa, is this all you've got? A frog in a well who doesn't even know what the heavens are, actually named your formation the heaven-destroying Great Formation? You're really shameless. Your ignorance is laughable. Don't you want to see how I'm going to escape from this formation? Then open your eyes wide and watch. Not only am I going to break this crude formation, but I'm also going to destroy the Vajra puppets that you've so painstakingly created." As soon as he finished speaking, Ji Tianqing raised his right hand. A black light flashed in his palm, and the sword of burial of heaven appeared. He placed his left hand behind his back and held the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand. Boundless divine power exploded from him as he swung the sword violently. Heaven-splitting sword. In an instant, the sword of burial of heaven shone with a dazzling golden divine light. It transformed into a giant golden sword that was 100 miles long. It slashed toward the golden and purple light shield of the formation. He had used all his strength in this attack. The heaven and sword unification technique unleashed the strongest power he could muster. His strength had long reached 80 times that of a peak true god. The power of this attack was close to that of a level 4 heavenly god. This was a genuine sword of a heavenly god. The heaven-destroying Great Emperor Tianfa had spent so many years painstakingly setting up the heaven-destroying Great Formation. However, it had only just reached the heavenly god level. Kaboom! In the next instant, the giant golden sword slashed into the light shield of the formation. An earth-shattering explosion erupted. The deafening sound waves spread for tens of thousands of miles, causing the void to tremble violently. The destructive shockwaves, accompanied by endless golden and purple light shards, exploded in the void, creating a storm that spanned tens of thousands of miles. The giant sword slashed open a 1,000-mile-long and 10,000-foot-wide ditch in the thick light shield of the formation. The golden and purple divine power in the formation leaked out like floodwater and scattered across the void. The light shield of the formation within a 100,000-mile-wide radius shook violently with cracking sounds. With the huge gully as the center, thousands of cracks spread out in all directions. The shocking scene caused the heaven-destroying Great Emperor, the 3 marshals, and the 100 generals to be utterly shocked and in disbelief. Even though they had witnessed it with their own eyes, they still could not believe that Ji Tianqing had managed to break the heaven-destroying Great Formation with a single slash. The heaven-destroying Great Emperor Tianfa had spent 40 years and countless god-level resources to set up the heaven-destroying Great Formation with the 3 marshals and hundreds of martial gods. In the eyes of the crowd, there was no one in the Trichiliocosm who could use such a barbaric method to directly break the formation. It was not a miracle. It was a miracle. For a moment, everyone was immersed in astonishment. Their bodies stiffened and they could not utter a single word. The same thought flashed across everyone's mind. What kind of monster is Ji Tianqing? What level has his strength reached? Is he still human? How can he be so powerful? Is he an expert from the mortal world? Is he really not a god from the 9 heavens? While everyone was still in a daze, Ji Tianqing led Yunyao by long, and the 4 godly beasts through the gap in the formation and flew into the void. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. They left the heaven-destroying Great Formation easily and returned to the void. They stood 100 miles away from the heaven-destroying Great Emperor. The 81 Vajra puppets in the formation did not have their own consciousness and thoughts. They were only loyal to the heaven-destroying Great Emperor. Without the heaven-destroying Great Emperor's order, they stood in the formation like statues and did not stop Ji Tianqing and the others. When the heaven-destroying Great Emperor came to his senses and wanted to give the order to attack, it was already too late. Gasp! He stared ferociously at Ji Tianqing and could not help but gasp. Then, he sneered with a bitter look on his face. I see. No wonder you ignored my ambush and swaggered into the Brahma star. You are no longer who you used to be. Chapter 2708. The great Emperor of Heaven Slayer's heart was filled with shock and bitterness. He finally understood why Ji Tianqing had dared to barge into the Fangang planet despite knowing that he had set up an ambush. Ji Tianqing's strength had increased by more than 10 times. He was now able to ignore any ambushes and plots. In the face of absolute power, all plots were useless and laughable. The great Emperor of Heaven Slayer knew this better than anyone else. Because before he met Ji Tianqing, he'd relied on his absolute strength to sweep through the various stellar regions and was invincible before he met Ji Tianqing. Now retribution had come. He was the one who had been swept away and crushed. Ji Tianqing looked at him with a smile and said mockingly, "Great Emperor of Heaven Slayer, now that you see it clearly, you should understand the difference between you and me. Don't make any more pointless struggles, just surrender and admit defeat. In the name of the God of War, I will give you a dignified death. Furthermore, if you are sincere in pledging allegiance to me, I can spare your life and bestow upon you the honor of being my personal guard." Ji Tianqing did not want to kill the great Emperor of Heaven Slayer for now. He wanted to keep him alive to find clues about the upper world spiritual beings. It would be even better if he could make the great Emperor of Heaven Slayer submit. Ji Tianqing was once a supreme being who ruled over thousands of deities. It was indeed a great favor to have the great Emperor of Heaven Slayer, who was half a step away from becoming a heavenly god, as his guard. One must know that back in the god world, countless divine monarchs and peerless geniuses wanted to follow by his side. However, he had mercilessly rejected them all. However, when the great Emperor of Heaven Slayer heard this, he was so embarrassed that he almost vomited blood. Ha ha! What a joke! The great Emperor of Heaven Slayer was so angry that he laughed. He roared with a ferocious expression, "Ji Tianqing, that's what I said to you in the past. Now you are saying the same thing to me. All you did was break my heaven-destroying formation, and you want me to admit defeat and surrender? You are too naive. I am the great Emperor of Heaven Slayer. I am the ruler of all 3,000 worlds. Moreover, I was chosen by the supreme being of the upper world to be the representative of the mortal world. What right do you have to do that? What right do you have to make me submit? Are you worthy?" Ji Tianqing's words were a great blow to Martial Emperor Tian Fa. It was a great humiliation. Even if he were to die here, he would never surrender to Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing was still smiling. His expression was calm and his eyes were full of confidence. "Whether I'm qualified or not, you'll soon know the answer. You, on the other hand, have missed such a great opportunity and are destined to be reduced to a tragedy." Ha ha ha! The great Emperor of Heaven Law was even angrier. He bellowed, "Ji Tianqing, you are so arrogant and shameless." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows disapprovingly and said, "If that's the case, then there's nothing more to say. Let's see who's the real deal." As he spoke, he was about to brandish the sword of burial of heaven and use his ultimate move to attack. "Wait!" The great Emperor of Heaven Law waved his hand to stop him. He asked in a low voice, "Ji Tianqing, before the battle, I have a question for you. A few decades ago when I came to Xixiao Star, I beat you up so badly that you ran away. At that time you were only a LV3 true god. You were captured by me and almost lost your life. Now only a few decades have passed. How did you reach the half-step to heavenly god realm and increase your strength by 100 times? This has never happened in the 3,000 worlds for tens of thousands of years. A true god realm elite is considered a rare genius if they can increase their cultivation level by 1 level in a few decades." This question troubled the great Emperor of Heaven Law. He could not believe it and could not understand it. If he could not get an answer, he would forever have a thorn in his heart. Ji Tianqing sneered and said in a playful tone, "You really want to know the answer? Easy. Submit to me and be my guard. Then I'll tell you the truth." "Bastard! You're digging your own grave." The great Emperor of Heaven Law was enraged. He waved his hand and gave the order to attack. "Everyone listen up. Capture Ji Tianxing for this emperor. He decided not to waste any more time talking to Ji Tianxing. As long as they captured him, they could interrogate him. Yes, sir. The three marshals cupped their fists and bowed. Attack! Hundreds of golden-armored generals took out their weapons and roared with murderous intent. The next moment, the three marshals led the golden-armored generals out of the battleship and pounced on Ji Tianxing. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Everyone spread out and surrounded Ji Tianxing and the others. Then they waved their light blades, which covered the sky and covered the earth, and drowned everyone's figures. Ji Tianxing, the great emperor, and the four godly beasts did not hesitate in the face of the attacks from the heaven law executioners. The marshals waved their weapons and unleashed their super skills that could destroy heaven and earth. Absolute shadows of 10 directions. Ji Tianxing's body shone with golden light and turned into 10 shadows in an instant. They appeared in all directions. Each of the shadows waved their divine swords and unleashed their sword radiance toward the three marshals and the golden-armored generals. Milky Way strike. Yunyao waved her Dawnstone divine sword and unleashed a Milky Way strike toward the heaven law executioners who were charging toward her. Sky-roaring dragon. Bai Long waved his Dawnstone heavy sword and unleashed 2 white dragon shadows that were tens of thousands of feet long. They charged toward the golden-armored generals. Qian Yu Black Dragon, Azure Glaze and Lan Kuan also unleashed their ice radiance, divine flames and light blades. Both sides were true immortal realm elites. The super skills that they unleashed had the power to destroy heaven and earth. The divine radiance and light blades clashed fiercely in the void, creating a deafening explosion. The violent shockwaves created ripples in the void, along with the colorful divine radiance shards, and created an earth-shattering storm. Soon, the first clash between the two sides had ended. The outcome surprised the heaven law executioners. They could not believe their eyes. Their divine skills had been blocked by Ji Tianxing and the others. Ji Tianxing, the marshals, and the 4 divine beasts were only slightly injured. However, the 3 marshals and the golden-armored generals had paid a heavy price. More than 20 generals had been severely injured. More than a dozen of them had been killed on the spot. Even the 3 marshals were sent flying by Ji Tianxing's sword radiance. Cracks appeared on their armors and their helmets fell to the void. They looked rather pathetic. The heaven law executioner was so shocked that he could barely keep his composure. If Ji Tianxing was the only one who was powerful, then so be it. However, Yunyao and Bai Long beside Ji Tianxing were also very powerful. One of them was at LV9 True Immortal Realm, and the other was at LV8 True Immortal Realm. Even the 4 divine beasts that were as large as mountains had reached LV7 True Immortal Realm. What was going on? Such a terrifying lineup of elites was comparable to the heaven law executioners. Moreover, Ji Tianxing was as powerful as a heaven god. The heaven law executioner finally panicked. He quickly ordered the 81 Vajra puppets and roared, "What are you waiting for? Kill them all for this emperor. Kill Ji Tianxing at all costs." End of chapter. Chapter 2709. The Vajra puppets didn't know fear. They only obeyed orders. When they heard Great Emperor Heaven Punisher's order to attack, they charged at Ji Tianxing and the others fearlessly. Swish, swish, swish. The 81 Vajra puppets spread out and formed a huge encirclement around Ji Tianxing, Yunyao, and the others. They released invisible divine soul blades and attacked the group with their fists and feet. The Brahma race cultivators who practiced the Brahma Gang divine path not only had powerful divine souls, but their physical strength and defense were also very strong. Ji Tianxing knew how powerful it was. Without any hesitation, he released his spiritual power and formed an invisible shield that covered an area of 100 miles. Bang 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 bang. Thousands of divine soul blades slammed into the divine soul light shield, causing a series of loud noises. Everyone was safe and sound. They were not harmed at all. However, the Vajra puppets rushed over and their giant fists and feet enlarged in everyone's eyes. Ji Tianxing waved the sword of burial of heaven emotionlessly and slashed at the Vajra puppets with 81 golden light swords. Yunyao, Bai Long and the 4 divine beasts also used their divine spells to fight back. Boom 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 boom. The divine blades of light that blotted out the sky collided with the Vajra puppet, causing a massive explosion. Countless light blades were shattered into millions of pieces, scattering in the void. The 81 Vajra puppets were all knocked back. However, most of the Vajra puppets were unharmed and had withstood the attacks of Bai Long and the 4 divine beasts. Only the 18 Vajra puppets were severely injured after being hit by Ji Tianxing and Yu Niao. Their giant bodies were full of holes and holes. 5 of the Vajra puppets were in the worst condition. They were cut into 8 pieces by the sword auras and fell into the air. Even so, the great Emperor of Heaven Punisher was heartbroken and his face darkened. Damn it! I spent a lot of time collecting those Vajra puppets from the entire Brahma Gang planet zone. I spent a lot of effort and resources to make them into Vajra puppets. That goddamn Ji Tianxing actually killed 5 people in one move? To Emperor Tian Fa, the 81 Vajra puppets were his best work. They were powerful and terrifying killing machines. Not only did he want to use these Vajra puppets to kill Ji Tianxing, but he also wanted to use them to conquer the universe and crush the various major star fields. But now it seemed like his plan was about to be destroyed. Kill him. Emperor of Heaven Extermination roared anxiously and furiously. He ordered the 3 marshals and dozens of generals to attack Ji Tianxing. At the same time, he also took out a 3-meter-long pitch-black saber and jumped into the battlefield to kill Ji Tianxing. Even Emperor of Heaven Extermination's battleship had locked onto Ji Tianxing and kept shooting at him. Boom boom boom. Another 300 purple light beams shot toward Ji Tianxing with destructive power. Not far from him, Emperor of Heaven Extermination and the 3 marshals swung their swords and charged toward him with murderous intent. In the void to the left and right, more than a dozen heaven-defying generals and 9 Vajra puppets also launched attacks without fear of death. Facing the attacks, Ji Tianxing didn't panic at all. He was still calm. He used the dragon elephant fist with his left hand, and a mountainous shadow of a dragon elephant broke the 300 purple light beams. He held the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand and swung it in the air. Hundreds of golden sword auras shot toward the generals of Heaven Extermination and the Vajra puppets. Boom boom boom. Crack. Crack. With a series of loud bangs and shattering sounds, half of the more than 20 generals of the Heaven Punishing Army and the Vajra puppets were cut into pieces. The other half were also severely injured by the sword auras. They flew back with blood spurting out of their bodies. At the same time, Emperor of Heaven Extermination held the divine blade with both hands and slashed a giant purple light beam toward Ji Tianxing's head. Ji Tianxing roared as his body emitted a golden light that soared into the sky. He used the ultimate skill of the celestial dragon tyrant body and instantly turned into a 3,000-meter-tall golden armored giant. He held the Heaven Barrier sword with both hands and raised it above his head, blocking the great Emperor Tian Fa's attack. Clang! An earth-shattering explosion erupted, shaking the void for tens of thousands of miles. The violent impact made Ji Tianxing's body tremble. He took a dozen steps back before he could steady himself, but he was unharmed. The sharp blades of divine light released by the 3 marshals also hit him, but they didn't cause any damage at all. At this moment, Ji Tianxing was like a god that had descended from the heavens, a god of war that had descended upon the mortal world. He was extremely powerful. End of chapter. Chapter 27:10. Ji Tianxing didn't hold back at all. He unleashed all his power, which was comparable to a LV4 heavenly god. After using the ultimate skill of the celestial dragon tyrant body, his strength and defense soared to a terrifying level. He was already in an invincible position. Moreover, he had merged with the 5 elements world, which made him immortal. No matter how the Emperor of Heaven Punishing, the 3 marshals, the generals of Heaven Punishing, and the Vajra puppets attacked him, they couldn't hurt him at all. Bang bang bang. Purple phantoms and sharp blades filled the sky as they landed on his body, one after another, with the power to destroy everything. However, he wasn't afraid at all. Golden light flashed all over his body. He shook his body a few times and shattered everyone's attacks. Apart from the Emperor of Heaven Punishing, who could pose a slight threat to him, he ignored all the other divine skills. However, the fist radiance, leg radiance, and sword radiance that he threw out with every move were fatal. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Dozens of dazzling sword radiance mixed with lightning fell on the crowd. Instantly, A few more generals of heaven punishing and Vajra puppets were smashed into pieces and turned into ashes. Ji Tianqing used the 10 directional vanishing shadows again, and his body turned into 10 phantoms as he rushed into the crowd and started a massacre. Bang bang bang. Fist radiance, leg radiance and sword radiance filled the sky. They exploded in the crowd with deafening sounds. More than a dozen generals of heaven punishing and Vajra puppets were smashed into pieces. They died on the spot. Even the 3 marshals couldn't withstand his head-on attack. They were sent flying again. After the 2 sides fought for 10 breaths of time, the void that was originally filled with people became empty. 20 generals of heaven punishing and 18 Vajra puppets had all been killed by Ji Tianqing. Only the Emperor of Heaven punishing and the 3 marshals were left. They were still fighting fiercely with Ji Tianqing. However, the 3 marshals were also covered in wounds and blood. They were greatly weakened. Even the Emperor of Heaven punishing was injured. He was in a sorry state. The 9 heavens' everlasting golden crown on his head had been shattered by Ji Tianqing. Fell into the sky. Her long purple hair hung loosely over her shoulders, covering half of her face. The cloak and armor he was wearing had also been slashed by the sword light and were in tatters. However, the more Ji Tianqing fought, the more ferocious he became, and the more violent he became. He was like a blazing golden sun, rampaging through the void, and no one could stop him. The 3 marshals had just charged forward when they were sent flying by him. Great Emperor Tian Fei's ultimate move was shattered by Qin Nan's fists and sent flying with a kick. Lunatic. That damned beast, he's gone mad. Emperor Tian Fei was both furious and ashamed. He cursed at the top of his lungs. He turned his head to look at the void behind him and roared at the soldiers in the warship, "A bunch of useless trash. Didn't I tell you to lock onto Ji Tianqing and kill him at all costs?" The dozens of golden armored captains on the battleship suddenly had a sullen expression on their faces, unable to voice out their grievances. Everyone felt helpless as they began to mutter in their hearts. "Great Emperor, can't you see that we've been firing non-stop? But Ji Tianqing's speed is too fast. He's dodged most of the divine cannons that we've fired. Even if some of the divine cannons hit him, they're like tickles to him. They're not lethal at all. It's not that we're not trying our best. The enemy is just too powerful. Your Majesty, that Ji Tianqing is obviously a deity who has descended to the mortal world. Why do we have to risk our lives fighting against him?" Of course, they could only think about it in their hearts. They did not dare to say it out loud. Everyone knew that Great Emperor Tian Fei was in a fit of rage and had nowhere to vent his anger and humiliation. Anyone who dared to get close to him would be courting death. Soon, the captains gathered their thoughts and focused on piloting the battleship. They continued to fire at Ji Tianqing. Boom! 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 Whoosh! 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 The purple light pillars that covered the sky rained down on Ji Tianqing's body. In less than 15 minutes, the battleship had been firing at Ji Tianqing non-stop. It had consumed more resources than conquering a planet. Ji Tianqing had been attacking ferociously. He wanted to kill the 3 marshals and capture Great Emperor Tian Fei as soon as possible. However, Great Emperor Tian Fei's battleship had locked onto him and was firing at him relentlessly. This restricted his movements and restricted his movements. Finally, Ji Tianqing was enraged. He had given up on Great Emperor Tian Fei and the 3 marshals and turned around to charge at the heaven-sundering battleship. Whoosh! With a flash of golden light, Ji Tianqing used the law of space and teleported himself 1,000 miles away. He appeared above the heaven-sundering battleship. The captains on the battleship were shocked. They hurriedly piloted the battleship to escape. Great Emperor Tian Fei, who was 1,000 miles away, was also shocked. He let out a cry of anger. "No, Ji Tianqing is a bastard. He wants to destroy my battleship." When Great Emperor Tian Fei had invaded the 5 Elements world, he had been severely injured by Ji Tianqing. His god-level battleship had also been destroyed. After escaping back to planet Heaven Fa, he had ordered the craftsmen of the heaven-sundering race to build a true god-level battleship as quickly as possible. It was impossible to build another true god-level battleship. Without the blessing of the upper world's deities, the craftsmen of the heaven-sundering race could not do it. Therefore, this supreme-grade true god-level battleship was one of Great Emperor Tian Fa's most important divine weapons. However, this battleship was about to be destroyed. Ji Tianqing, who was 1,000 feet tall, stood on the battleship like a mountain. He held the 8,000-foot-long burial of heaven sword with both hands and swung it down with all his might. Kaboom! With an earth-shaking boom, the heaven burier sword struck the heaven-sundering warship. Purple light and metal shards that blotted out the sky burst out. Under Great Emperor Tian Fa's furious gaze and the dozens of captains' faces filled with despair, the heaven-sundering battleship was cut in half. The destructive impact tore countless cracks and holes in the battleship that had been cut in half. Billions of pieces burst out and formed a terrifying hurricane in the void. More than 100 martial god realm Great Emperor guards were blasted into minced meat on the spot. Almost half of the captains who were controlling the battleship were killed in an instant. None of them had a complete corpse. More than 20 captains who were lucky enough to survive saw the wreckage of the battleship fall into the void and burst into flames. They quickly abandoned the battleship and fled. However, as soon as they escaped into the void, they were met with a calamity. Ji Tianqing, who was like a god of war, swung his sword and sent out dozens of sword gleams. They fell from the sky and attacked. The martial god realm captains were unable to dodge or defend themselves. They were immediately killed by the sword gleams. Next, Ji Tianqing swung his sword a few more times and cut 2 more pieces of the battleship into pieces. Great Emperor Tian Fa's battleship was completely destroyed. It turned into billions of pieces of scrap metal and metal that scattered in the void. The heaven-sundering race guards who had been hiding in the wreckage of the battleship all died without a burial place. Great Emperor Tian Fa witnessed this with his own eyes. He was so furious that he was about to explode. Chapter 27:11. Heavenly God. Who else can stop that bastard Ji Tianqing? The Great Emperor of Heaven Punisher looked into the sky and could not help but roar. As the leader of the Heaven Punisher, he had the strength of a half-step heavenly god and the ambition to conquer all 3,000 worlds. However, he had been defeated here. For the first time in his life, he felt helpless and hopeless. Ji Tianqing was so powerful that it had completely exceeded his expectations and imagination. At this moment, he did not know what to do to kill Ji Tianqing. No. He no longer dared to hope that he could kill Ji Tianqing. He only hoped that the situation would turn around so that he could stop the unruly Ji Tianqing. Therefore, he turned his head to look into the distance to check if the generals of Heaven Punishing and the Vajra puppets had killed Ji Tianqing's companions. If he could capture Yunyao or Bai Long, he would have the right to negotiate with Ji Tianqing. However, when he saw the situation in the distance, his face turned even darker. Originally, there were more than 100 generals of Heaven Punishing and the Vajra puppets attacking Yunyao, Bai Long, and the 4 divine beasts in 6 groups. Now Yunyao, Bai Long, and the 4 divine beasts were only slightly injured. They were still alive and kicking. On the other hand, more than half of the generals of Heaven Punishing and the Vajra puppets had been killed. Only about 40 of them were still fighting a bloody battle. They were desperately attacking Yunyao and the others. However, the generals of Heaven Punishing and the Vajra puppets were also badly injured. Their strength was weakening rapidly. The Great Emperor of Heaven Punisher was a peerless powerhouse. He had sharp eyes. Of course he could see that they were going to lose. The generals of Heaven Punishing and the Vajra puppets would not be able to hold on for long. They would be killed by Yunyao and the others. By then, the Great Emperor of Heaven Punisher would only have 3 marshals left. At the thought of this, the Great Emperor of Heaven Punisher felt a chill run down his spine. He secretly released his divine consciousness to check the situation around him. He was already plotting how to escape. Ji Tianqing's 2 companions and 4 mythological beasts are currently surrounded and fighting fiercely. They definitely have no time to care about anything else. I just need to keep an eye on Ji Tianqing. When he's not paying attention, I'll have a chance to leave this place. Martial Emperor Tianfen soon made up his mind. Seeing Ji Tianqing dashing over from 1,000 miles away with the sword of burial of heaven, he growled with a strong killing intent, "Stop him!" The 3 marshals were all heavily injured. But their fighting spirit was still high and they refused to submit. When they heard Emperor Tianfei's order, they charged at Ji Tianqing with their weapons in hand without any hesitation. They released purple divine light that covered the sky and earth. Swish! Swish! Hundreds of dazzling purple divine light blades slashed toward Ji Tianqing with destructive power. At the same time, Great Emperor Tianfei unleashed all his divine power. He held the purple divine saber with both hands and executed his ultimate move, heaven-defeating slash. The 3-foot-long purple divine saber released endless dark purple divine light. It slashed out 900-mile-long light blades. Swish! 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 Each purple light blade was like a terrifying purple dragon. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws as they charged toward Ji Tianqing. Its power was extremely fierce and unparalleled. It was enough to tear the sky apart and destroy the land within 10,000 miles. The great Emperor of Heaven Punishing had once used the same technique on a certain planet. When the 9 purple dragon saber lights slashed down, they destroyed 200,000 miles of land and killed more than a dozen martial gods and almost 100,000 alien race cultivators. 200,000 miles of land turned into scorched ruins. The sky collapsed. That scene was truly earth-shattering. It was as if the end of the world had come. But now, Emperor Tianfen didn't expect to kill Ji Tianqing with this move. He only hoped to injure Ji Tianqing and stall him for a while. That was the only way Great Emperor Tianfei was confident that he could escape. It looked like the 9 purple saber lights and the attacks of the 3 marshals were about to engulf Ji Tianqing like a surging flood. Great Emperor Tianfei used the teleportation technique and was about to escape 1,000 miles away. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing decisively swung his sword and unleashed 3 cold light blades at the 3 marshals. Swish! 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 The 3 dazzling rays of cold light flashed in the void for a moment before disappearing. In the next second, the 3 cold lights appeared a few hundred miles away. They exploded in front of the 3 marshals with blinding light. Boom! 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 3 balls of white divine light exploded. They soared into the sky like 3 giant mushroom clouds. The 3 marshals' muscular bodies were immediately blasted into pieces. Blood and flesh splattered everywhere. The anger and murderous intent on their faces froze. Their eyes widened in shock, revealing looks of horror and disbelief. They couldn't understand how Ji Tianqing was able to use such a strange sword technique. Even when they were on high alert, he was still able to stab them and destroy their bodies from a distance. This was definitely one of the most mysterious assassination techniques in the world. However, the 3 marshals did not have time to think. Their bodies exploded. Their divine souls were also severely injured. Their consciousness became blurry. His burly body turned into pieces of flesh and blood that splattered in the void. Fortunately, their life force was strong enough. Even though their bodies had been blasted into pieces, they were still alive. There was still hope for survival. However, they knew that Ji Tianqing would never let them go. In the next second, Ji Tianqing would turn their flesh and blood into dust. They would die completely. However, the 3 marshals had guessed wrong. Ji Tianqing did not chase after them. He disappeared from the sky with a flash of white light. In the next second, he teleported 1,500 miles away and appeared in another place. Almost at the same time, the void not far away from him lit up with purple light. Whoosh! The great Emperor of Heaven Slayer appeared out of nowhere. He also used his teleportation divine art and teleported 1,000 miles away, escaping to this void. Great Emperor Tianfei had just finished teleporting. Before he could celebrate, he saw Ji Tianqing looking at him with a cold smile on his face. Haha, our battle has just begun and you want to run away? Aren't you in too much of a hurry? Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked mockingly. The great Emperor of Heaven Slayer froze. His face was as black as the bottom of a pot. His eyes were filled with shock. You? How could you? The great Emperor of Heaven Slayer was stunned. He could not believe what he had just seen. Ji Tianqing finished his sentence and said mockingly, You must be wondering how I knew you were going to run away and how I predicted the direction you would run in. Ha ha ha. I told you that this is the difference between the weak and the strong. Your schemes, plans, and thoughts are all within my expectations. Don't waste your energy. Accept your fate. The great Emperor of Heaven Slayer was so embarrassed that he almost vomited blood. He roared in a hoarse voice, "Don't even think about it. Even if I have to die with you, I will never bow down to you." As he spoke, he used his teleportation ability again and teleported thousands of miles into the depths of the dark and empty void. However, just as he teleported 1,000 miles away, Ji Tianxing caught up with him and appeared beside him. "Go ahead and run. If you can get away, I will admit defeat." Ji Tianxing looked at him with a smile and spoke in a disdainful tone. Chapter 27:12. Humiliation. This was a great humiliation. The great Emperor of Heaven Slayer was so angry that his lungs almost exploded. He glared at Ji Tianxing with bloodshot eyes and his body was burning with dark purple flames. "Ji Tianxing, you be ****starred. Be ****starred. Who do you think I am? How dare you mock and blaspheme me? I swear that I will grind your bones to dust and drag out your divine soul to torture for 10,000 years. Ji Tianxing sneered even more mockingly. "Why wait? I want to see how you are going to grind my bones to dust today." "You." The great Emperor of Heaven Slayer was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of purple blood. "You be ****starred. You will die a horrible death." The great Emperor of Heaven Slayer had never been so humiliated in his life, and he had never hated anyone so much. Ji Tianxing had successfully made him experience the extreme of anger and humiliation. However, there was nothing he could do. He didn't want to argue with Ji Tianxing anymore. He turned his anger into power and teleported away. Swoosh! There was a flash of purple light and the great Emperor of Heaven Slayer appeared in the void 1,000 miles away. He had just teleported away when Ji Tianxing appeared not far away from him. The great Emperor of Heaven Slayer was both shocked and furious. He used his teleportation skill again and teleported 1,000 miles away. However, the result was the same. There was a flash of white light and Ji Tianxing appeared next to him again. He looked at him with a faint smile. Swoosh! The great Emperor of Heaven Slayer gritted his teeth and teleported 1,000 miles away again. However, Ji Tianxing immediately caught up with him, following him like a shadow. In just 10 breaths, the two of them had teleported 10 times in the void. Ji Tianxing was still expressionless. His divine power was stable and vigorous. However, the great Emperor of Heaven Slayer could not take it anymore. His entire face turned purple. Phew! Phew! He was panting violently. The blood in his body was boiling, and his consciousness was somewhat blurred and dizzy. Even though he had reached the half-step to the divine realm, his divine power and body were extremely strong. However, he hadn't grasped the law of space, so he couldn't withstand the backlash of teleporting more than 10 times in a row. His entire body felt like it was being torn apart. Even his god soul and consciousness had cracks. He could not suppress the rampaging divine power in his body. He turned his head to look at Ji Tianxing and saw Ji Tianxing looking at him calmly with a mocking expression. Ji Tianxing had no intention of attacking. He was just like a cat playing with a mouse. He wanted to force him into a corner and make him surrender in despair. Damned beast! Not only has he mastered the power of space, but his divine body and divine power are also 10 times stronger than mine. If we continue to chase like this, I won't be able to withstand the backlash of tearing the space apart. Soon I will explode and die, but he will be fine. Emperor Tianfa glared at Ji Tianxing with hatred in his eyes. He panted and thought to himself, "I can't continue like this. I can only use that trump card." With that thought in mind, a dark golden bone appeared in the sleeve of the great Emperor of Heaven Slayer's robe. The bone was about the size of a palm, but it was broken and incomplete. 3 broken fingers were connected by broken joints. It was obviously not a human's finger. It had a metallic luster and contained a mysterious power. The mysterious bone was covered in cracks and filled with an ancient aura. Emperor Tianfa had found it when he was exploring a secret realm in the Earth's core, on the main planet of a certain star zone. There was no doubt that it was the bone of a god that had been left behind in the ancient times. After Emperor Tianfa had obtained it, he had studied it for a long time and discovered that the bone had a special effect. That was, it could travel through space and teleport over long distances, He thought that the owner of the bone must have been a heaven god who had mastered the law of space. Emperor Tianfa had rarely used the bone of the heaven god, because no one could force him to flee in a panic. Now the bone of the heaven god finally came in handy. Emperor Tianfa activated his divine power without hesitation and poured it into the bone of the heaven god. The dark golden bone of the heaven god immediately became crystal clear and shone with a dazzling white light. Whoosh! In an instant, the white light swallowed him up and he disappeared into the void. The vast white light brought him 90,000 miles away, and shook off Ji Tianqing instantly. Whoosh! Emperor Tianfa reappeared 90,000 miles away in a flash of white light. He looked around instinctively. When he saw that Ji Tianqing had not followed him, he sneered smugly. Ha ha ha! You little bee *starred. Let's see how you'll catch up to me this time. Emperor Tianfa heaved a sigh of relief. He looked down at the bone of the heaven god in his hand and smiled happily. Luckily, I have this bone of the ancient heaven god. That's why I can. Huh. Why is the bone of the heaven god broken? Emperor Tianfa suddenly realized that the cracked bone of the heaven god had broken into dozens of pieces. His smile froze on his face. He shook his hand and the dozens of pieces turned into dust and scattered in the void. Maybe I was too impatient and used up its remaining power. That's why it broke. What a pity. Emperor Tianfa thought for a moment and guessed the reason. He was filled with regret. However, he waved his hand and scattered the dark golden dust. He mumbled to himself, forget it. This bone of the heaven god has helped me escape. I've already done my job. If it's broken, then so be it. I'll get better divine items in the future. Emperor Tianfa comforted himself and the displeasure in his heart disappeared. He tidied his messy hair and was about to take out a small flying boat to fly into the depths of the void. Although his flying boat was not with him, he had many divine items in his infinite space ring. Among them were a dozen flying divine items. They were all upper-grade true god treasures that he had made himself. He usually used them to reward his soldiers. However, before he could take out his flying boat, a white light shone in the void beside him. Whoosh! There was a flash of white light and a young human in a white robe appeared before him. There was no doubt that it was Ji Tianqing. Emperor Tianfa's body froze. His eyes were as cold as ice and his face was contorted. You bastard who just won't leave. How did you catch up with me? Emperor Tianfa was shocked and furious. He was about to lose his mind. He had sacrificed a piece of the heaven god's finger bone to escape 90,000 miles away. He thought that he had gotten rid of Ji Tianqing. However, he did not expect that Ji Tianqing would catch up with him in the blink of an eye. Was there any justice in this world? Ji Tianqing, what the hell are you? How did you teleport 90,000 miles away? Emperor Tianfa, where did you get this infinite space divine item? Let me have a look. Ji Tianqing smiled mockingly. As he spoke, he reached out and grabbed at Emperor Tianfa. The time had come. Emperor Tianfa's divine power was about to run out. He had used up all his trump cards. This time, Emperor Tianfa had nowhere to run. Chapter 27:13. Ji Tianqing. You've gone too far. I'm going to kill you. Seeing Ji Tianqing's outstretched hand, the Emperor of Heaven Punisher roared angrily and swung his saber. He had no more trump cards and knew that he could not escape from Ji Tianqing's pursuit. He could only fight to the death with Ji Tianqing, while he still had some divine power left. That was the only way he could survive. After all, Ji Tianqing had just teleported 90,000 miles away. No matter what superpower he used, it would consume a lot of divine power. His divine body would also suffer from the backlash. This was the best time to counterattack. Raging Dragon slashes the sky. The Emperor of Heaven Punisher roared angrily. He held his divine saber with both hands and swung it at Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing did not draw his sword. He stretched out his left hand and released a dazzling golden light. It formed a dragon claw that covered the sky. Sky-capturing dragon claw. The golden dragon claw, which was hundreds of miles wide, gave off a domineering aura. It grabbed at the dazzling purple dragon shadow that was hundreds of miles long. Bam! With a muffled explosion, the ferocious and furious purple dragon shadow was captured by the golden dragon claw. No matter how powerful the purple dragon shadow was, or how furious it could not escape. It could only struggle with all its might under the golden dragon claw. Could not escape. As Ji Tianqing clenched his left hand, the golden dragon claw suddenly exerted force and crushed the purple dragon shadow. Crack! With a crisp crack, the purple dragon shadow shattered into thousands of pieces and scattered in the sky. Ji Tianqing had crushed the superpower of the Emperor of Heaven Punisher. He was both embarrassed and furious. He swung his divine saber again, however. Before he could use his second superpower, Ji Tianqing teleported in front of him and threw a punch. Fast. Like a flash of lightning, it arrived in a flash. The dazzling golden fist hit the Emperor of Heaven Punisher's body before it could even reach his eyes. Bam! A dull sound of impact burst out, and dozens of ripples spread out in the void like ripples. Great Emperor Tianfa immediately bent over like a shrimp. He spat out a mouthful of purple blood and flew backward with a ferocious look on his face. He had just flown 100 miles away, and had yet to dissipate the violent impact. Ji Tianqing followed up like a shadow, his right leg fiercely chopping down like a long knife. Bah! Emperor Tianfa had no chance to dodge. He was hit in the shoulder by the glittering leg shadow. Crack! His broad and sturdy shoulders instantly caved in. All the bones inside were broken, and purple blood splashed out. Great Emperor Tianfan was sent tumbling into the depths of the void like a sandbag. At the same time, Ji Tianqing teleported to catch up with him. Shadows of punches and kicks filled the sky. Pung pung pung. Let's go. Violent punches and kicks rained down on the great Emperor of Heaven Extermination's body. Muffled thuds rang out endlessly. Great Emperor Tianfa was completely stunned. His body kept shaking and swaying. He flew back and forth in the void, spraying purple blood and pieces of flesh everywhere. Ji Tianqing's strength was unparalleled. He could easily destroy the defense that Great Emperor Tianfa was so proud of. Ji Tianqing's speed was unparalleled in the world. When he attacked with his fists and kicks, only shadows of golden light filled the sky. Great Emperor Tianfa could not see where he was at all. 20 breaths later, Ji Tianqing had punched 600 times and kicked 400 times in total. Great Emperor Tianfa, who had been burly and full of vigor, had completely changed shape. He had become a bloody ball of flesh. His torso, limbs, and head could no longer be distinguished. His facial features, head, and tail could no longer be distinguished. He had become a pile of mush. Finally, Ji Tianqing stopped attacking. His body was as straight as a sword as he stood in the void. He stared coldly at Great Emperor Tianfa and asked in a deep voice, "Do you know why I attacked you with my fists and kicks instead of using my sword to kill you?" Great Emperor Tianfa's hoarse and weak voice came from the mush. You worm. You are humiliating me." Ji Tianqing shook his head and said indifferently, "I have humiliated you enough when I was chasing after you. Now you don't even have the right to be humiliated by me." I punched and kicked to avenge the martial artists and people of the thousands of worlds in the major star regions. The Heaven Punishers are inhumane. They have invaded the various star regions and occupied hundreds of thousands of worlds. It is your cruel massacres that cause the deaths of trillions of living beings and thousands of worlds to flow with blood. It is your greed that caused trillions of living beings to lose their homes and become lowly slaves. They have to live in darkness and pain. Great Emperor Tianfa fell silent for a long while after hearing Sumo's righteous and impassioned words. After a long time, a few hoarse sneers came out from the mangled meat paste. "Ha ha ha, do you really think of yourself as a saint who saves the world? You are just a drop in the ocean, a grain of sand in the endless universe. Don't pretend to be so noble." Ji Tianqing's expression was still cold. A cold light flashed in his eyes. He nodded and said, "All right, then let's not talk about the 3,000 worlds and the billions of living beings. Now I want to avenge a pure, kind, and innocent person. You once burned her to ashes with the divine flames of burning heaven right in front of my eyes. She died in endless pain. I have always kept this blood feud in my heart. I have never forgotten it. Now please have a taste of being burned by the divine flames." Chapter 27:14. God Lord Silvermoon, you died because of me. You were reduced to ashes by the divine flames of the heaven burning. Now, I will pay back twice the pain you suffered to the heaven-punishing emperor. Ji Tianqing muttered to himself as he looked at the sky with a deep gaze. The heaven-punishing emperor has fallen into my hands. He can't die even if he wants to. I will make him suffer endless torment. I won't let him off so easily. Now your spirit in heaven can rest in peace. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing sighed in his heart. He closed his eyes. That beautiful, lively, and innocent figure appeared in his mind. She seemed to be standing in the endless darkness. She turned her head and smiled faintly. She was calm and serene. Then she turned and left with a calm and relieved look in her eyes. She turned into a dazzling beam of starlight that pierced through the endless darkness. Finally, she became a star in the sky. The scene ended there. Ji Tianqing had repaid his debt to God Lord Silvermoon. He opened his eyes. The melancholy on his face disappeared, replaced by coldness and indifference. By now, 90% of the heaven-punishing emperor's body had been burned away. All that was left was a pile of charcoal the size of a watermelon. His physical body was almost completely destroyed, and his divine soul was severely injured. Even so, he had not died. He had only fallen into a coma. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and withdrew the divine flames of the heaven burning and the lightning. He reached out and grabbed the black smoking pile of charcoal. He sized it up expressionlessly. I'll seal you up for now. I'll search your divine soul and memories later. As he spoke, Ji Tianqing formed a seal with both hands and formed a mysterious golden seal. Swish, 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 swish. Thousands of golden seals merged into the charcoal, forming a heavenly god-level seal that sealed the heaven-punishing emperor. Then Ji Tianqing threw him into the sword world, turned around and flew back. Before long, Ji Tianqing returned to the original battlefield. He saw Yunyao, the white dragon, and the 4 divine beasts from afar. They were cleaning up the battlefield, picking up divine artifact fragments and interspatial rings. As for the heaven punishers, not a single one was seen. Obviously, the battle had already ended. The generals of heaven and the Vajra puppets had all been killed by them. Even the 3 great marshals had fallen. Shua! A white light flashed, and Ji Tianqing returned to Yunyao's side. Yao Yao, how's your situation? Is anyone hurt? Ji Tianqing looked at her with concern. Seeing that she was not hurt, he was relieved. He then looked at the white dragon and the 4 divine beasts not far away. White dragon was slightly injured, but it was not a big deal. It was just that his robes were ragged and his hair was messy. He looked a little miserable. The strength of the 4 divine beasts was relatively weak, and they were all either lightly or heavily injured. There were many wounds and bloody holes on their bodies. However, this did not affect their battle prowess. They would recover after a period of recuperation. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing revealed a gratified smile and nodded slightly. After going through hundreds of battles, they have all been tempered to become extremely powerful. No matter how difficult the situation is, they will still be able to win. The ambush set by the great emperor of heaven and earth was an inescapable trap. It was a sure kill trap. However, in the end, Ji Tianqing and the others were not killed, but the great emperor of heaven and earth was completely annihilated. This was simply a legend. Ji Tianqing was proud of everyone. Yunyao looked at him with concern and sized him up from head to toe. She had known and believed that Ji Tianqing was as powerful as a divine realm expert. He could easily defeat the great emperor of heaven and come out unscathed. However, when Ji Tianqing was chasing the great emperor of heaven and earth, she was still worried that something might happen to him. Now that Ji Tianqing had returned safe and sound, she was truly at ease. Tianqing, I'm so glad that you're not hurt. What about the great emperor of heaven and earth? Did you catch up with him? You didn't let him escape again, did you? Ji Tianqing smiled and shook his head. Back then I was still weak and could not do anything to him. I could only watch him escape. Now that I've reached the transcendent stage and reached the peak of the true God realm, how could I let him escape again? I've already captured him and sealed him up. Yunyao smiled as if a heavy burden had been lifted off her shoulders. She nodded and said, let's keep him alive for now. It won't be too late to deal with him after we find out more about the upper world's divine realm. Now that the great Emperor of Heaven and Earth has been annihilated and even the great Emperor of Heaven and Earth has been captured by you, the great Emperor of Heaven, what right does the great Emperor of Heaven have to stop us? Soon we will be able to destroy the great Emperor of Heaven and get rid of this threat. Ji Tianqing nodded in agreement and asked, what about the 3 marshals? Did you kill them? Yun Yao explained, didn't you kill the 3 marshals before you went after the great Emperor of Heaven and Earth? Their vitality was quite tenacious. Even after they were reduced to pieces of flesh and blood, they still wanted to gather together and restore their divine bodies. However, we quickly dealt with the great Emperor of Heaven and the Vajra puppet and killed the 3 marshals as well. Soon 100 breaths had passed. White Dragon and the 4 divine beasts had finished cleaning up the battlefield and quickly flew back to Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao's side. After chatting for a while, they all knew the result of the battle and the fate of the great Emperor of Heaven and Earth. White Dragon and the 4 divine beasts were also excited and overjoyed. Their hearts were filled with hope and anticipation. After calming down, White Dragon took out a bunch of shining rings and handed them to Ji Tianqing. Master, look. We've cleaned up the battlefield and looted more than 70 space rings. I've roughly looked through them. They're all kinds of divine weapons, gems, pills, and materials. Basically, they're all God-level cultivation resources. These are what the great generals of heaven and marshals had looted from various star areas. It's definitely a great fortune. Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. All right. You'll be in charge of cleaning up these space rings. Organize the resources and give them to me. Yes, Master. White Dragon loved collecting and organizing cultivation resources. He nodded without hesitation. Qian Yu, the Black Dragon, Azure Glaze, and Lan Kuan also showed off their loot. Old Ji, when we were cleaning up the battlefield, we found many divine weapons and some strange primordial divine items. Ji Tianqing glanced at them and waved his hand. Forget it. Keep these things for yourselves. If you find anything interesting, tell me. Qian Yu smiled and nodded. He then put away the scattered divine items. Old Ji is still the best. Ji Tianqing smiled and said, you're all injured. Go back to the battleship and heal yourselves. I still need to go to Fongying planet. The Black Dragon asked in confusion. We've killed all the great generals of heaven and great Emperor of Heaven. Old Ji, why are you still going to Fongying planet? Ji Tianqing led everyone onto the battleship and explained. The great generals of heaven have been killed. However, there are still many great generals of heaven on Fongying planet. I have to get rid of them. There's still a long way to go to get rid of all evil. Chapter 27:15. The White Dragon and the 4 divine beasts were recuperating in Tianqing's battleship. Ji Tianqing used a small trick to break through the divine light barrier of the Brahma Gang Star Zone. Then he brought Yun Yao into the Brahma Gang Star Zone and flew to a continent. The situation was just as he had expected. A large number of soldiers were stationed on the Brahma Gang Star Zone, and they controlled the 6 continents. The soldiers were caught off guard and didn't realize that danger was approaching. The great Emperor of Heaven Punishing had led 3 marshals and 100 generals to guard the place. He had also created 81 Vajra puppets and set up a terrifying sky-destroying array. Everyone thought that the Brahma Gang Star Zone's defense was extremely strong, and it was absolutely impregnable. Even if Ji Tianqing came to invade, he would be killed. However, no one would have thought that the great Emperor of Heaven Punishing and the marshals and generals had already been killed. When Ji Tianqing entered the Brahma Gang Star Zone, no one was on guard and all the continents were quiet. He entered a divine nation and easily killed many heaven-punishing warriors, and captured a few heaven-punishing martial gods. He used the soul-searching technique and quickly got the information he wanted. He found out the location of the heaven-punishing divine palace. In the depths of one of the continents, there was a mountain range that stretched for millions of miles. That was the origin of the continent, and it was also the top land with spirit veins. The aura of divine power was extremely strong. The majestic heaven-punishing divine palace was built in that mountain range. Tianqing's battleship entered the mountain range and soon found the heaven-punishing divine palace. Then Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao personally destroyed the entire divine palace. More than 20 martial gods and thousands of heaven-punishing guards and soldiers were killed by the two of them. After that, Ji Tianxing and Yunniao took a large amount of cultivation resources. He also used the general's communication jade slip to order the captains guarding the continents to return to the heaven-punishing divine palace immediately. Ji Tianxing didn't say that the heaven-punishing divine palace had been attacked, and asked the soldiers to return to fight. Instead, he used the general's tone to convey the great emperor of heaven-punishing's order. He said that the great emperor had something urgent to announce. Therefore, after the captains guarding the continents received the order, they didn't hesitate to gather their soldiers and return to the heaven-punishing divine palace as quickly as possible. What happened next was self-explanatory. When the heaven-punishing soldiers rushed back to the heaven-punishing divine palace, they were met with a calamity. One after another, the heaven-punishing divine palace was the great emperor of heaven-punishing divine palace. The great emperor of heaven-punishing divine palace was great emperor of heaven-punishing divine palace had heaven-punishing the divine palace. The heaven-punishing divine heaven god emperor, heaven dragon divine palaces. Only 2 million puppet powerhouses remained, and they were scattered across the continents to help the heaven-punishing race maintain their rule. Ji Tianxing continued to travel around the continents to purify the puppets controlled by the heaven-punishers. Heaven of heaven god of heaven divine heaven. 90 days later, all 2 million puppets were purified. The Fan Gang star was truly saved, and Ji Tianxing also reaped a huge harvest. The heaven-mending orb absorbed a huge amount of life-saving divine light, and its power increased by 2 times. Naturally, Ji Tianxing's power also doubled, reaching 81 times that of a peak real god. After the matter was over, he and Yunniao left the Fan Gang planet. After returning to the 5 Elements world, everyone entered the Divine Pagoda to cultivate in seclusion. Ji Tianxing did not enter the Divine Pagoda. He still had a very important matter that needed to be resolved as soon as possible. The great emperor of Heaven Punisher, who had been burnt to a crisp, was still asleep in the Sword World. Ji Tianxing took him out of the Sword World and prepared to interrogate him about the secrets of the Heaven Punisher star and the upper realm deities. However, the heaven-slaying emperor was still unconscious due to his severe injuries. Ji Tianxing was too lazy to waste time, so he directly used the soul-searching technique to plunder his memories. This method was simple and crude but very efficient. Swoosh! Ji Tianxing released a few rays of mysterious black light from his palm and enveloped the great emperor of Heaven Punisher. In the blink of an eye, the mysterious black light entered the charred flesh and started to erode the great emperor of Heaven Punisher's divine soul. The Heaven Punisher was not good at cultivating the divine soul. However, the great emperor of Heaven Punisher's divine soul was different from ordinary people's. It had obviously been baptized by the deities of the upper realm, and its defensive power was very strong. Fortunately, Ji Tianxing had released the sky-burning divine flame, which had severely injured the great emperor of Heaven Punisher and almost killed him. His divine soul had been severely damaged, and cracks had already appeared on it. Its defensive power had also been greatly reduced. As a result, Ji Tianxing had to use some tricks to successfully invade the great emperor of Heaven Punisher's divine soul and plunder a large amount of memories. Hundreds of millions of images and scenes surged into Ji Tianxing's mind like tidewater, forming a continuous river of memories that flowed rapidly. Time passed quietly. The great emperor of Heaven Punisher's divine soul and memories flooded into Ji Tianxing's mind like a raging tide. This lasted for 15 minutes before it ended. In fact, the great emperor of Heaven Punisher had lived for thousands of years. His complete memories were at least 10 times more than this. However, Ji Tianxing had done a rough selection when he was retrieving the memories. He had removed all the memories from thousands of years ago. He had also omitted the less important things in memories. Even so, the great emperor of Heaven Punisher's memories contained too much information. It was complicated and vast. Ji Tianxing had ended the soul search not because he had obtained the information he wanted. Instead, the great emperor of Heaven Punisher's divine soul and memories had gone blank. It was as if someone had erased them. This is strange. A part of the great Emperor of Heaven Punisher's divine soul and memories have been erased? Did he do this to protect himself after he was severely injured and unconscious, or did someone erase his memories? Ji Tianqing was deeply confused. He ended the soul search and focused on reading the great Emperor of Heaven Punisher's memories. Therefore, all kinds of images and information flashed through his mind like lightning. After an hour, Ji Tianqing finally sorted out the images and memories. He had an answer. I see. He had obtained a lot of information that he wanted. Many of the questions in his mind were answered. He could not help but nod. Through the great Emperor of Heaven Punisher's memories, he knew what had happened in the past 1,000 years. This included the great Emperor of Heaven Punisher's initial appearance, when they had been protected by the gods, and when they had developed rapidly. The great Emperor of Heaven Punisher's 5 continents, tens of billions of people, 3 seas, and dozens of ancient ruins and secret realms appeared in Ji Tianqing's mind. Even though he had never been to the great Emperor of Heaven Punisher, now that he had merged the great Emperor of Heaven Punisher's memories, he knew the great Emperor of Heaven Punisher like the back of his hand. It was as if he had been there in person. Other than the great Emperor of Heaven Punisher, Ji Tianqing also learned many useful secrets. For example, Crown Prince Tianshu's cultivation and talents, Queen Yun Shuiyan's appearance, strength and ambition. All kinds of information and secrets gave Ji Tianqing a deeper understanding of the great Emperor of Heaven Punisher. He gradually understood the whole story and was confident that he could destroy the great Emperor of Heaven Punisher. Chapter 27:16. The great Emperor of Heaven Punisher's 1,000 years of memories were like a treasure to Ji Tianqing. However, after he sorted through the memories, his expression turned grave and his expression turned sour. This was because the great Emperor of Heaven Punisher's memories contained everything about the Heaven Punisher tribe and the Heaven Punisher planet. The only thing missing was the secrets of the upper realm's deities. Ji Tianqing searched through the great Emperor of Heaven Punisher's memories, but all he could find were scenes of divine grace, divine light descending, and billions of people worshipping him. Other than that, there was no information about the deity's true appearance, identity, strength, or other means. Even the orders that the deities had given to the great Emperor of Heaven Punisher were nowhere to be found. This result made Ji Tianqing frown deeply. His eyes flashed coldly. No wonder the great Emperor of Heaven Punisher's memories are incomplete. It seems that the blank parts are related to the deities of the upper realm. With the great Emperor of Heaven Punisher's abilities, he could not have erased his own memories. So, the deities of the upper realm must have erased part of his memories. With the abilities of a Lord God and a King God, they could have used such divine powers. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and guessed the result. He was filled with hatred. Damn it! Who is the deity of the upper realm that ordered the Heaven Punisher tribe? They already have such a powerful force. Why are they still so cautious? The more Ji Tianqing thought about it, the more confused he became. He became even more anxious. However, he could only get these clues from the great Emperor of Heaven Punisher's memories. He could not dig further. The deity behind the Heaven Punisher tribe was too powerful and very cautious. He was at his wits' end and could not continue his investigation. After a long time, Ji Tianqing could only sigh helplessly and put this matter aside for now. Wait until I conquer the Heaven Punisher planet, capture Tianshu and Empress Yun Shuiyan, and search their souls and memories. Hopefully, I can find something. There was no hope for the great Emperor of Heaven Punisher. Ji Tianqing could only place his hopes on Yun Shuiyan and Tianshu. He opened his eyes and looked expressionlessly at the charred great Emperor of Heaven Punisher. Great Emperor Tianfa was still unconscious. No one knew when he would wake up. His divine soul's memory was already blank, and now that Ji Tianqing had plundered 1,000 years' worth of memories, his divine soul's injury was even more severe, and his consciousness was in a mess. This great Emperor Tianfa was no longer the real him. Even if Ji Tianqing tortured him with the soul-burning divine flame, it wouldn't be enough to vent his anger. After all, great Emperor Heaven Punisher had lost his mind. There was no way he would repent. To Ji Tianqing, Heaven Punisher was no longer useful. He waved his hand and unleashed a few wisps of pitch-black godly flames of annihilation, which engulfed Great Emperor Tianfa. Shua! The annihilation divine flame burned fiercely and quickly burned the charred meat into ashes. In less than 100 breaths' time, Great Emperor Tianfa had turned into dust. Both his physical body and divine soul had vanished. This was true death in death. A peerless expert, the Great Emperor of Heaven Punisher, had been reduced to ashes just like that. Not long after, Ji Tianqing calmed himself down and buried this matter in the bottom of his heart. He controlled the 5 elements world and continued to roam the Brahma Gang star zone. He saved the various worlds he encountered along the way. However, most of the worlds had been abandoned by the Heaven Punisher. The Heaven Punisher soldiers guarding the worlds had already retreated with large amounts of resources. Only a large number of puppets were left in the various worlds. They were still helping the Heaven Punisher to guard their bases. It seems that Great Emperor Tianfa has already prepared for both sides. If he can kill me on the Brahma Gang star, everything will be as normal. No one will be able to stop the Heaven Punisher from dominating the universe. If he fails, the Heaven Punisher soldiers guarding the various worlds will also retreat with resources and treasures. They will escape back to the Heaven Punisher star zone. Ji Tianqing calculated silently. He had a plan in mind. He could guess that most of the Heaven Punisher soldiers had already retreated to the Heaven Punisher star zone. The Heaven Punisher's elites had withered. They would definitely tighten their defenses and concentrate all their forces on the Heaven Punisher star zone, waiting to fight him to the death. This was the result he had expected. At the same time, it was the Heaven Punisher's only choice. Although the Heaven Punisher soldiers in the various worlds had retreated, they still left behind a large number of puppets. Ji Tianqing could only work hard to purify the puppets. Day after day, year after year. When he had saved more than 30 worlds and left the Brahma Gang star zone, 12 years had already passed. In the past 12 years he had gained a lot. The power of the Heaven Patching Pearl had increased by 40 times. The life-saving Holy Light had also increased by 100 times. Taking a martial god as an example, the life-saving light contained in the Heaven Mending Orb could resurrect 500,000 of them. If it was a martial sage, the Heaven Patching Pearl could revive 10 million martial sages. Furthermore, Ji Tianqing's strength had also increased greatly. He was now 99 times stronger than a peak true god. Under the restrictions of the rules of heaven, this was already the limit. Even if he saved more worlds and purified more puppets, it would be useless. Chapter 27:17. 800 years ago, the Heaven Punisher star zone had already become the Heaven Punisher's main camp. The Heaven Punisher had taken over the 300 worlds and turned them into an impregnable fortress. The cultivators and commoners living in the various worlds had long gotten used to the Heaven Punisher's rule. Even if they were enslaved by the Heaven Punisher and were ordered around and oppressed by the Heaven Punisher, they were still at ease. They had no thoughts of resisting. In the White Dragon's words, the cultivators and commoners of these worlds had long since learned to resign themselves to adversity. Their servility had been deeply rooted in their hearts. After all, most of the cultivators and commoners had less than 800 years of life. They had not experienced the great war and tragic scenes of the Heaven Punisher's invasion. They had lived under the Heaven Punisher's rule since birth. Most of the cultivators and experts who had lived for more than 800 years had died in the Great War back then. A portion of the survivors had been turned into puppets by the Heaven Punisher. They were loyal and devoted to the Heaven Punisher. How could they have any thoughts of resisting? When Ji Tianqing and the others killed their way into the various worlds and killed the Heaven Punisher, they became the public enemy of the entire world. Not only did they have to deal with the Heaven Punisher, but they also had to deal with the encirclement of the various races' experts. Even if they explained that they had come to save the commoners, the cultivators and commoners of the various worlds were not moved. They even righteously stated that they lived very peacefully and did not need anyone to save them. The White Dragon and the 4 divine beasts were very angry when faced with such a situation. Even Yunyao and Jiku were so angry that they were depressed. Ji Tianqing was not surprised at all. He calmly persuaded everyone. No matter what race, all living beings like to be content with the status quo. Even if they lose their freedom and are enslaved and oppressed, their lives are miserable. As long as they are still alive, they can endure anything. Over time, their servility is deeply ingrained in them. Thus, we cannot blame the commoners for being too stupid. Let's not think of ourselves as noble saviors. We are just avengers. We only want to destroy the Heaven Punisher. We just need to do what we think is right. Everyone felt much better after listening to his advice. Later on, when they killed their way into the various worlds and were surrounded by the Heaven Punisher and indigenous cultivators, they no longer had any psychological burden. No matter who it was, as long as they besieged or tried to assassinate them, only death awaited them. On average, they had to save a world every 2 months and kill thousands of heaven-punishing generals and soldiers. The heaven-punishing star area, which had been peaceful for 800 years, was now in a bloody storm. In the first few years, every world that they went to was guarded by a large number of heaven-punishing generals. 5 years later, they had saved 30 worlds. From then on, when they arrived at the various worlds, they found that the soldiers guarding the worlds had all left. Without a doubt, the news of Ji Tianqing's invasion of the heaven-punishing star zone had already spread to every world. The Heaven Punishers guarding the various worlds received orders from Planet Heaven Punisher and retreated to Planet Heaven Punisher. They wouldn't make unnecessary sacrifices. They would stay in various worlds and wait for Ji Tianqing to slaughter them. When Ji Tianqing and the others realized this, they decisively changed their plans. He no longer headed to the various worlds to kill the Heaven Punishers. Instead, he headed straight for Planet Heaven Punisher. After all, the Heaven Punisher Great Emperor, the Imperial Tutor, the Left and Right Protectors, and the 5 Marshals were all dead. In the current Heaven Punisher clan, only Empress Yun Shuoyan and Crown Prince Tian Shu were left. No matter how many Heaven Punishers the mother and son gathered, their power was limited. Ji Tianqing and the others weren't worried at all. They would have no problem killing their way into Planet Heaven Punisher. In the depths of the Heaven Punishing Star area, the famous planet Heaven Punisher floated silently in the void. The entire planet was protected by a dazzling purple divine light. There was also a huge 5-colored band of light in the void around it. The 5-colored band of light with a diameter of 1 billion miles was formed by a vast amount of divine power. It was like a protective ring around Planet Heaven Punisher. It could also send endless divine power to Planet Heaven Punisher. It was very mysterious. In all the 3,000 worlds, only Planet Heaven Punisher had this item. After all, only Planet Heaven Punisher was protected and supported by the upper realm's godly spirits. This planet with a diameter of 200 million miles could only be ranked second among the 300 worlds in the Heaven Punishing Star area. The largest planet was Planet Celestial Globe. 900 years ago, Planet Celestial Globe had been the main planet of the entire star area. However, after the Heaven Punishers had taken over the entire star area, they had become the overlords of this star area. Even the name of Planet Celestial Globe had been changed to Heaven Punisher Star Area. Currently, Planet Heaven Punisher was home to almost 30 billion Heaven Punishers. The population had long swelled to the point of exploding. Not only were there kingdoms and cities built on the land, but there were also countless kingdoms and cities built under the ground, in the mountains and forests, and on the islands of the endless sky ocean. The problem of housing for the Heaven Punishers had been solved. At least everyone had a place to settle down. However, the Heaven Punishers had an extremely strong reproductive ability. After receiving the protection and baptism of God's grace, their strength had increased rapidly. Planet Heaven Punishers' cultivation resources had long been overexploited and collected. It had become barren and barren. If not for the nourishment of endless divine power, Planet Heaven Punisher would have become a barren and abandoned planet. Fortunately, the Heaven Punishers had sent billions of elite soldiers to invade various star areas and occupy more than 1,000 worlds. Every day, countless Heaven Punishing battleships would return from various star areas and send the vast amount of resources they had plundered back to Planet Heaven Punisher. When the battleships left Planet Heaven Punisher, they would bring along a large number of elite soldiers and experts to replenish the forces of various star areas. This was the only way to maintain the balance and stability of Planet Heaven Punisher. More and more people were sent to various star areas. The Heaven Punishers had plundered the cultivation resources of various worlds and sent them back to planet Heaven Punisher. On the surface, it seemed that the Heaven Punishers were rapidly expanding and strengthening. At most, they would be able to conquer all 3,000 worlds in 1,000 years. However, Great Emperor Heaven Punisher, the Thearch's son, and the many marshals had already expected this result. In less than 200 or 300 years, the balance of planet Heaven Punisher would be broken. At that time, the entire star would be abandoned. The 30 billion Heaven Punishers would have to split into two groups and move to planet Celestial Globe and another star. Therefore, Great Emperor Heaven Punisher had been preparing for this since 100 years ago. 2 billion Heaven Punishing craftsmen were building cities and kingdoms on Celestial Globe and the other star day and night. 100 years later, when planet Heaven Punisher was on the verge of being abandoned, the Heaven Punishers would cross the void and move to those two stars. However, no one had expected that the Heaven Punishers would suffer an unprecedented blow while this plan was in progress. Great Emperor Heaven Punisher and many experts had died. The only experts left in the Heaven Punishers were the Thearch's son and the Thearch's empress. When the news reached planet Heaven Punisher, the Thearch's empress and Tianshu were extremely shocked and grief-stricken. At the same time, Tianshu decisively issued a ban to block the news and forbade anyone from leaking the secret. Chapter 27:18. That moment. It was evening and the sun was setting. Planet Heaven Trader was as peaceful as ever. The people of the Heaven Trader in the 5 continents and 3 seas were cultivating and living as usual. Everyone was kept in the dark and did not know that the great emperor of the Heaven Trader and a few marshals had died. More than 30 billion people were still immersed in their pride and longing, waiting for the Heaven Trader to unify the 3,000 worlds. Ordinary martial artists worked hard to cultivate. The experts who had just reached the cross-calamity realm were gathering in the imperial cities of the various countries, waiting for the annual Divine Light Baptism. After the Divine Light Baptism, they would directly reach the martial sage realm. After cultivating in seclusion for another 10 years and stabilizing their strength, they would be able to join the Heaven Trader fleet. By then, they would leave the crowded and resource-poor planet Heaven Trader and follow the fleet to conquer the universe. By then, everyone would be able to slaughter the foreign races and plunder a large amount of resources. If they performed well and were able to make contributions, they would be able to obtain vast lands and rewards. The huge temptation was constantly tempting and encouraging the hundreds of millions of martial artists. Of course, many martial artists also realized that many fleets had returned to planet Heaven Trader recently. The mighty battleships and the majestic teams gathered high in the sky, forming a sea of battleships. However, no one thought too much about it. They only thought that the great emperor had a new goal and mission. No one knew what kind of mission the hundreds of thousands of battleships were carrying. Return to the mother planet quickly. After handing in the cultivation resources, the fleets will gather as soon as possible and guard the mother planet in outer space. This was an order from the Emperor God Palace, and it had already been passed down to the fleets. Therefore, more than 200,000 battleships carrying 30 million Heaven Punishing warriors returned to planet Heaven Punishing and guarded the sky. Large batches of battleships flew back to planet Heaven Trader every day. After handing in the resources to the Emperor God Palace, they returned to the fleets to guard planet Heaven Trader. There was a battleship every few thousand miles in the sky above the 5 continents and 3 seas. Furthermore, outside the divine light barrier of planet Heaven Trader, the dark and cold void was filled with battleships. The entire planet Heaven Trader was surrounded by battleships. All the soldiers of the Heaven Trader fleet were on high alert and did not dare to slack off. However, the 30 million soldiers of the heaven-conquering army began to mutter in their hearts. They were full of doubts. What exactly had happened? Why did the Emperor God Palace send out an order to recall all the fleets to defend planet Heaven? Were they going to start a war with some power? Or was it that the heaven-punishing planet was about to face a major crisis and needed protection? Or perhaps Great Emperor Heaven Punisher had a new target or plan? No one knew the exact reason. No one knew that the heaven-defying martial monarch, whom they treated like a deity, had already turned into ashes. High above the origin continent, At the peak of the vast sea of clouds stood a magnificent ancient temple. This palace was the highest ruling center of the Heaven Punisher race, the sacred and majestic Divine Emperor Palace. The Divine Emperor Palace was built 20,000 years ago. It was the masterpiece of the previous great Emperor Tian Fa. It was only after the previous great Emperor Tian Fa ascended to the divine realm 6,000 years ago that the current great Emperor Tian Fa succeeded him. The temple, which was thousands of feet tall, exuded an ancient aura. Under the reflection of the setting sun, the temple shone with golden light, still glorious and solemn. Tens of thousands of elite guards in silver armor guarded every corner of the Emperor God Palace. Hundreds of elite martial gods in dark golden armor were on standby in the Emperor God Palace. The entire Emperor God Palace was under martial law. The atmosphere was heavy and depressing. At this moment, in the depths of the Emperor God Palace, in a magnificent and spacious secret room that was shrouded in purple light, 8 true God Realm generals in golden armor were guarding the door of the secret room. The divine power in the secret room was extremely dense. It formed a 5-colored mist that surged in 100 feet wide space. The floor and walls were paved with star divine stones and decorated with thousands of rare divine stones. No spirit vein or treasure ground in the world could compare to this secret room. Cultivating in this secret room would increase one's strength 20 times faster than cultivating in the outside world. In the north of the secret room, countless divine stones were inlaid on the wide wall, forming a huge painting of 100 birds looking up to a phoenix. The 100 birds and the phoenix that was about to fly were shining with divine light. They were lifelike. Under the exquisite stone carvings, there was a 3-foot-long purple jade bed. The bed was not made of ordinary purple jade, but a divine stone that was similar to jade. It contained a special divine power that could strengthen one's divine soul and divine power. It was of high quality. This was a divine item that Great Emperor Tianfan had found in a galaxy. It was rare, and there was only one of it in the entire Tianfan tribe. Great Emperor Tianfan had spent more than 20 years to make this stone bed. He placed it in this secret room for Empress Yun Shuayan to sleep and cultivate. A graceful and hazy figure sat cross-legged on the wide bed made of purple jade, and it was indistinct under the cover of the 5-colored divine mist. A gauze curtain made of supreme-grade star golden sand covered the entire stone bed. No one could see what was going on inside. The slim and graceful figure was like a goddess that had walked out of legends. She was tall and had long icy blue hair that reached her waist. Her hair was tied up in a noble bun. She wore an icy blue dress inlaid with divine stones. There were tassels on her collar and sleeves that shone with icy blue light. She was beautiful like an 18-year-old girl. Her features were picturesque, and she had a pure and elegant temperament. Her appearance and temperament were filled with the gentleness of the water spirit clan. However, she had a pair of long and narrow phoenix eyes. The corners of her eyes extended to her temples, giving her a dignified and murderous aura. When she opened her eyes, her large and bright golden pupils were filled with the domineering aura of a god. She was the most mysterious expert of the Tianfan tribe. She was also the empress that Great Emperor Tianfan doted on and trusted the most, Yun Shuayan. Not only was she the saintess of the water spirit clan, but she was also the reincarnation of a divine lord from the upper world. In the Tianfan tribe, her status and position were second only to Great Emperor Tianfan. At this moment, the voice of the guard captain came from outside the secret room. "Empress, His Highness has arrived." Yun Shuayan looked up slightly. She flicked a ray of icy light from her right hand and hit the door of the secret room. Instantly, the door of the secret room creaked open. A huge figure that was 100 feet tall walked through the 5-colored mist and stepped into the secret room. Although the secret room was very spacious, the 100 feet tall giant still seemed to feel oppressed and cramped when he arrived. His body was as black as ink, but there were 99 icy blue lines crisscrossing the surface of his body. There were a few hideous scars on his huge head. The top of his head was bald and shiny. He exuded a ferocious and domineering aura, and his face was very gloomy. However, when he stood in the middle of the secret room and faced the misty purple jade bed, his expression was very respectful and submissive. "Mother, you've finally come out of seclusion." Chapter 27:19. There was no doubt about it. The 30-foot-tall bald giant was the son of the great emperor of Heaven Punisher, and Yun Shuiyan, Imperial Prince Tian Shu. After being beaten half to death by Ji Tianqing, he had escaped back to the Heaven Punisher planet under the protection of the Neptune halberd. He had been in seclusion for decades, and his injuries had finally healed. Not only that, he had also benefited greatly from his seclusion in the hourglass of time deep within the Emperor God Palace. The flow of time in the hourglass of time was 10 times faster than in the outside world. Only 30 years had passed in the outside world, but he had been in seclusion for 300 years. Not only had he healed, but he had also mastered a divine art, greatly increasing his strength. Yun Shuiyan nodded slightly and sighed in a low voice. Your father has fallen, and the marshals have been killed one after another. We are the only ones left in the Heaven Punisher clan. How can I not come out of seclusion? Tian Shu's face was filled with hatred. He gritted his teeth and said firmly, Mother, don't worry. Not only have I recovered from my injuries, but I have also mastered the coiling dragon 4 C's divine art you taught me. Now your child's strength has increased tenfold. When Ji Tianqing invades, I'll definitely be able to avenge my humiliation and kill him. Yun Shuiyan was slightly relieved, but she still shook her head and said calmly, Tian Shu, it's not that I don't believe you. You are indeed the #1 genius in the universe, and I am proud of you. Nevertheless, judging from Ji Tianqing's various performances, his strength had already reached an extremely terrifying level. Even if your strength increases by 4 times, you are still no match for him. Otherwise, your father and the marshals wouldn't have failed and been wiped out when they set up an ambush on the Fonggang planet. Tian Shu also understood that the difference between him and Ji Tianqing wasn't something that could be made up for by a 4-fold increase in strength. Yun Shuiyan's judgment rendered him speechless, and he couldn't refute it. However, he was filled with unwillingness, and endless jealousy and hatred grew in his heart. Mother, where did Ji Tianqing come from? I am already the #1 genius in the universe. How can he be stronger than me? A freak like him shouldn't exist in the mortal world. If it wasn't for him, I would still be the #1 genius, and our clan's plan to dominate the world wouldn't be hindered. Yun Shuiyan could obviously tell that Tian Shu was crazily jealous of Ji Tianqing. She said calmly, Tian Shu, you might be right. Mother, what do you mean? Tian Shu was stunned for a moment and showed a puzzled expression. Yun Shuiyan explained, Mother looked up all the information regarding Ji Tianqing, and combined it with his performance over the past 100 years, she finally came to a conclusion. A monstrous figure like him should not appear in the mortal world. He might not be from the mortal world. Maybe he's like Mother, a reincarnated powerhouse from the upper realm. Tian Shu's expression changed as he frowned. A moment later, he came back to his senses and hurriedly asked, Imperial Mother, didn't you say that the cycle of reincarnation is the most heartless? Could it be that only 1 in a million experts could reincarnate with the memories of their past lives? Looking at the past 30,000 years, you're the only one in the Heaven Punishing Brahma Gang and Black Dragon Star Zones. Yun Shuiyan said calmly, Ji Tianqing comes from the Purple Heaven Star Zone, which is the 4th star zone. All this time, the Purple Heaven Star Zone has been remote, and our clan doesn't know much about it. Moreover, Ji Tianqing's performance and his shocking growth rate are all miraculous and heaven-defying. There's no other explanation other than that he's the reincarnation of a god from the upper realm. Tian Shu took a deep breath and was silent for a long time. His eyes flickered with a bright light, and it took him a while to accept this result. I see. He's the reincarnation of a god from the upper realm, which is why he has such heaven-defying talent and skills. In that case, I'm not weaker than him. I'm still the #1 genius in the universe. Tian Shu felt much better and regained his confidence as the #1 genius. Yun Shuiyan said calmly, it doesn't matter if you're the #1 genius or not. Not long ago, Mother received news that Ji Tianqing has already killed his way into the Heaven Punishing Star Zone. Soon, he'll come to the Heaven Punishing Star and fight with us. Tian Shu clenched his fists and said solemnly, Mother, don't worry. I've been keeping an eye on Ji Tianqing's movements. I've long been on guard. Since Father's death, I've taken over everything in the Emperor God Palace. I've already made preparations. I've called back the fleets of the major star zones to guard the heaven-punishing star. Moreover, I've sent many generals to add formations to the divine light barrier to increase its power. Now, not only are there more than 200,000 battleships and 30 million soldiers guarding the heaven-punishing star, there are also tens of thousands of divine formations waiting for Ji Tianqing to die. Hearing Tianshu's words, Yun Shuyan smiled with relief and nodded slightly. Tianshu, you've finally grown up. You can take charge of the situation on your own. However, those weak fleets and soldiers can't stop Ji Tianqing's attack at all. Only a force as powerful as a god can kill him and guard the heaven-punishing star. Sky Pivot frowned, and the hope and confidence in his heart dissipated. He looked at Yun Shuyan with a worried expression and asked, Mother, you've been in seclusion for more than 200 years. Have you mastered a peerless divine technique? Yun Shuyan nodded and said unhurriedly, 200 years ago, Mother reached the peak of the true God realm. However, I have to help your father complete his great cause. I have to protect you as you grow. I also have to prepare for the God King realm in the future. Therefore, I haven't ascended yet. I've stayed on the heaven-punishing star to cultivate the coiling dragon 4 C's divine technique. This divine technique originated from the ancient times. It was created by a certain God King in the dragon realm. Cultivating this divine technique can continuously increase one's talent and comprehension, allowing one's strength to increase rapidly. Tianshu also knew that a cultivator's talent and comprehension were innately determined. It was easy to predict how great a cultivator's future achievements would be. If one's talent and aptitude weren't abnormal enough, they were destined to never become a god king. No matter how hard they cultivated, it was impossible for them to become a god king. There were only a few methods that could increase a cultivator's aptitude and comprehension. However, even if it was forcefully increased, the effects were limited. However, the coiling dragon 4 C's divine technique was different. It could simulate the 4 C's of consciousness and increase one's cultivation by 4 times. At most, it could increase a god's aptitude and comprehension by 4 times, and increase one's strength by 36 times. Therefore, Yun Shuyan's true strength was far greater than that of her father, the heaven-punishing emperor. Yun Shuyan continued, after cultivating for more than 200 years, I've finally gained something. My strength is now 30 times that of a peak true god. Unfortunately, that bastard Ji Tianqing came. Otherwise, I'd have to cultivate for another 200 years to increase my strength by 36 times and reach my limit. When that happens, I'll be able to change my fate and increase my talent and comprehension to the God King realm. When I ascend to the higher realms, I'll have full confidence in breaking through to the God King realm. Heavens! Mother's strength has increased by 30 times and she's close to her limit? Tianshu was shocked. He was pleasantly surprised. Chapter 27:20. Tianshu had also cultivated the 4 C's coiling dragon divine technique, so he knew how powerful it was. However, he did not expect this technique to be so powerful. It allowed his mother's strength to reach 30 times that of a peak true god. Tianshu had always thought that after becoming a peak true god, one's strength would increase by 5 times at most. That was the limit. Just like his father, the great emperor of heaven Punisher. However, he did not expect the 4 C's coiling dragon divine technique to increase one's strength to 36 times. This was simply an unparalleled and unheard of martial art that shook the ancients and dazzled the contemporaries. As expected of the peerless technique created by the Dragon Realm's King of Gods. It's really powerful. Tianshu praised sincerely. He could not help but ask, Mother, since you've reached 30 times the strength of a peak true god, killing Ji Tianqing should be a piece of cake, right? Yun Shuyan's clear and calm gaze pierced through the 5-colored mist, and saw the hope and anticipation in Tianshu's eyes. She wanted to give a straightforward answer, but she could not bear to extinguish Tianshu's hope. After a moment of silence, she answered, Mother, I'm confident that I can fight him, but he has many followers who are also powerful. We can't rely on luck. We have to give it our all and use our last trump card. We can't afford to lose. Tianshu understood that the planet of Heaven Punisher was their last fortress. If they lost, they would not be able to protect the planet of Heaven Punisher, and they would be homeless. Mother Empress, your so-called final trump card. What do you mean? Yun Shuyan pointed at the sky and said playfully, the backer of the clan of Heaven Punisher. They spent thousands of years and effort to nurture the clan of Heaven Punisher to this level. They were halfway to dominating the 3,000 worlds, but someone jumped out to destroy them and destroy the entire clan of Heaven Punisher. No matter what, they won't sit back and do nothing, right? Tianshu thought to himself. He asked doubtfully, but mother, the heavenly axioms rules restrict them. They can't interfere with the matters of the mortal world. Apart from spreading divine light and baptizing, they can't do anything else. Yun Shuyan shook her head gently. The methods of the upper realms deities are not something you and I can imagine. Whether they can help or not, we must try our best. Don't waste any more time. Quickly send an order to the head ritual master. Tell him to immediately prepare for the sacrificial ceremony. Prepare 300,000 people as sacrifices. 300,000 people. Tianshu was shocked and asked in disbelief, Mother, this is 10 times the number of supreme-grade treasures. It's enough to hold 10 heavenly worship ceremonies. If this order is passed down, it will cause criticism from the people and affect the morale of the army. Yun Shuyan said expressionlessly, there are already enough Heaven Punishers. Most of our people are living like pigs. Apart from contributing to the great cause of our race, what else can they do? Moreover, this battle concerned the survival of the Heaven Punishing race. They could not rely on luck. As long as I can save the Heaven Punisher race, I won't hesitate even if I have to sacrifice 3 million or 30 million people, let alone 300,000. Tianshu was silent for a moment before he gritted his teeth and said, I understand. I will follow Mother's orders. With that said, Dubhe bowed to Yun Shuyan and left the chamber. Yun Shuyan was the only one left in the chamber, and it immediately quieted down. She looked at the door with a deep gaze. Her gaze seemed to be able to penetrate thousands of barriers and see the depths of the void. Ji Tianqing, oh Ji Tianqing, if you're really the reincarnation of a god from the upper realm, then this is the battle of destiny between you and me. I'd like to see who will be reborn and who will be the chosen one. Yun Shuyan muttered to herself. Her eyes were filled with confidence and murderous intent. 4 months passed in the blink of an eye. The vast and boundless starry sky was as cold and silent as ever. Planet Heaven Punisher was still surrounded by the 5-colored divine light. Outside the purple light barrier on the surface of the planet, there were densely packed battleships in the void. There were at least 100,000 battleships and tens of millions of Heaven Punishers guarding the southern hemisphere. After all, Ji Tianqing was rushing over from the Brahma astral star zone, and was heading in this direction. All the battleships were on high alert and were on high alert. The main cannons at the front of the battleships were opened, revealing their black muzzles. They could shoot out destructive light beams at any time. As a precaution, the northern hemisphere of planet Heaven Punisher was guarded by 50,000 battleships. In addition, there were 100,000 battleships on standby in the inner part of the divine light barrier and high in the sky above planet Heaven Punisher. This was all the battleships that the Heaven Punishers could gather in the past 2 years. There were also hundreds of thousands of battleships and hundreds of millions of Heaven Punishers scattered in the distant star zones. They would not be able to return for 3 to 5 years. However, all the soldiers believed in them. They had the advantage in numbers and were so powerful. Even if a few star zones joined forces and sent tens of millions of troops to attack planet Heaven Punisher, they would still be defeated on the spot. Right at this moment, a star shining with golden light was flying over from the depths of the void. Swoosh! The star that was wrapped in golden light dragged a long golden flame behind it, as it headed straight for planet Heaven Punisher. The two sides were still a few 100 million miles apart, but the tens of millions of soldiers guarding planet Heaven Punisher realized that the situation was not good. Although the shining golden star was not big, it was about 100 million miles in diameter. It had a diameter of about 100 million miles, which was only 1/7 of the heaven-destroying star. However, it was a real star after all. It tore through the void like a shooting star and flew toward planet Heaven Punisher without slowing down. In another day at most, The golden meteor would collide head-on with the Heaven Punisher star. How could the tens of millions of soldiers not be frightened and worried? The captains quickly reported the situation to the generals, and the generals also reported the situation to the temporary commanders of the battleships. The temporary commanders of the 5 battleships immediately acted as if they were facing a great enemy. They quickly sent the news back to planet Heaven Punisher and reported it to the Archgod Palace. The 5 commanders were all members of the royal family of the Heaven Punisher. They were the brothers of the Heaven Punisher Emperor and the cousins of Tianshu. They all had the titles of Prince and Lord. Of course, their strength was only average. They were between the 3rd and 5th level of the true immortal realm. If the Heaven Punisher had not been in danger and had no one to use, Tianshu would not have let them be commanders. Soon, the order from the Archgod Palace was delivered to the 5 commanders. Calm down. Be careful that this is a trick of the enemy. Order all the soldiers to prepare for battle. The Archgod and I will arrive soon. Be on standby. This order was given by Tianshu. It was obvious that he had discussed countermeasures with Yun Shuyan after receiving the news from the 5 commanders. However, the mother and son were in the Archgod Palace and did not see the golden shooting star. They did not know what was going on, so they could only go to the void to check it out. The 5 commanders held Tianshu's order and quickly calmed down. They quickly passed down the order to the generals. Soon the 100,000 battleships and tens of millions of soldiers received the news. After knowing that the Archgod and the Archgod were about to arrive, the morale of the soldiers quickly stabilized. Chapter 27-21. Although the tens of millions of soldiers were calm and on standby, they were still waiting for orders. Everyone stared at the dazzling golden meteor in the sky, their hearts filled with worry and anxiety. Seeing the meteor approaching with no sign of slowing down, the tens of millions of soldiers were on tenterhooks. The atmosphere in the 100,000 warships was heavy and oppressive. Everyone was filled with doubts and guesses. Why would a meteor appear at such a critical moment? Why was that meteor so big? Why was it thousands of times bigger than a common meteor? Why was that meteor heading straight for planet Heaven Punisher? Could it be an enemy of the heaven-punishing race that had used a divine power? Or was it just an accident? Was the heavens playing a joke on the Heaven Punisher? No one knew the answer. Everyone's hearts were in a state of turmoil and unease. Everyone was waiting for the Crown Prince and Empress to arrive as soon as possible so that they could make a decision. For hours passed in this torturous wait. A black dragon battleship, which was 3,000 feet long, flew out of the divine light barrier with 2 purple wings of light that blotted out the sky and arrived in the void. Swoosh! This majestic black dragon warship was Tianshu's flagship. It flew into the void of space and stopped above the numerous fleets. When the nearby warships saw the black dragon warship, they immediately cheered. Many of the soldiers relaxed, revealing expressions of relief. There was no doubt that the Crown Prince and Empress had finally arrived. Ka. The black dragon warship's hatch opened. Tianshu, who was 10 feet tall, strode out with his head held high. Following closely behind him was the 8-foot-tall, graceful Yun Shuyan. The mother and son walked to the bow of the warship and stood there, frowning as they looked into the depths of the sky. When they saw the dazzling meteor, their faces turned gloomy. Their eyes were filled with vigilance and doubt. Tianshu said in a low voice, "Meteors are common, but this is the first time I've seen such a huge meteor. Also, that meteor didn't appear earlier or later. It just had to appear now. Mother, I feel that there's something wrong with that meteor." Yun Shuyan nodded slightly, agreeing with what he said. Almost all meteors are fragments of stars. When they travel through the void at high speed, they will ignite with the divine flames of the heavens and become smaller and smaller. That meteor doesn't look like a star fragment. It looks more like a complete star. Also, that meteor is accelerating. Its target is planet Heaven Punisher. Its intentions are obvious. Mother, are you saying that the meteor is coming for us? Tianshu raised his eyebrows and asked coldly. Could that be Ji Tianxing's doing? Before Yun Shuyan could answer, he shook his head and said in disbelief, "No, that's impossible. No matter how powerful Ji Tianqing is, he can't break through the heavenly Tao's laws. How can he control of heaven Punisher? Even a true heavenly god can't control of heaven god of heaven Punisher. Yunshuyan nodded again and said with a heavy tone, back when Mother broke through to the Divine Lord realm, she was able to use her divine powers and use the stars as weapons. Ordinary heavenly gods don't have that ability. Therefore, Ji Tianqing can't control of heaven Punisher to attack us. Tianshu calmed down and asked again, if that's the case, that meteor was an accident? Just a coincidence? That's not entirely true. Yun Shuiyan shook her head and said solemnly, although Ji Tianqing doesn't have that ability, his origins are mysterious and unfathomable. He has all kinds of divine abilities. That meteor's arrival is so coincidental. It's most likely related to him. Damn it! Tianshu cursed and clenched his fists. His heart was filled with shock and jealousy. What kind of monster is that bastard? Why does he have so many despicable methods? Yun Shuiyan understood her son's feelings, but she couldn't enlighten him. She said calmly, with that meteor's speed, it will hit planet Heaven Punisher in 20 hours at most. With the size of that meteor, once it hit the Heaven Punishing Star, it would definitely bring disaster to the Heaven Punishing Star. When that happens, planet Heaven Punisher's divine light barrier will be destroyed. The 3 seas will be overturned, and more than half of the 5 continents will be submerged. Planet Heaven Punisher will collapse like the end of the world. At least 10 billion people will die. Tianshu was alarmed and anxious. He hurriedly asked Mother, what should we do? Yun Shuiyan shook her head calmly and said, if Mother recovers her Divine Lord's strength, she can control planet Heaven Punisher to move 100 million miles to avoid the meteor's attack. Or, she can use a great divine ability to intercept the meteor or even shatter it. Unfortunately, with Mother's current strength, she can neither teleport planet Heaven Punisher nor intercept the meteor. Tianshu became more and more anxious. He glanced at the countless warships in the void and had an idea. Mother, before the meteor approaches, I'll give the order. Let 100,000 warships use all their firepower to bombard the meteor at all costs. We will definitely be able to destroy it. Even if we can't destroy the meteor, we can weaken its power and minimize the losses. Yun Shuiyan thought for a moment and nodded slightly. Seems that this is the only way now. However, the meteor is still very far away. The warship's attack range is only tens of thousands of miles. You must immediately give the order for all the warships to meet it. Once they are within range, they will attack with all their might. Tianshu was stunned. His expression turned ugly. Only then did he remember that the warship's attack range was only tens of thousands of miles. It would only be effective when they were very close to the meteor. If all the warships meet it, they will only be able to fire a few shots before being hit by the meteor. They won't even have time to escape. If we do that, won't we be sending tens of millions of soldiers to their deaths? Tianshu looked at Yun Shuiyan with burning eyes. He instinctively objected to this decision. However, Yun Shuiyan looked into the void and said indifferently, the 30 million soldiers that were summoned back to planet Heaven Punisher are destined to be sacrificed for planet Heaven Punisher. Should we sacrifice tens of millions of soldiers to intercept the meteor or watch the meteor hit planet Heaven Punisher and cause the deaths of 10 billion people? It depends on your choice. Tianshu's body stiffened. He revealed a pained and hesitant expression. His heart was filled with struggle. He was silent for a long time before he took a deep breath. He gritted his teeth and made up his mind. Forget it. Isn't the purpose of our soldiers' existence to protect our homeland and our people? Now that they are sacrificing themselves to protect planet Heaven Punisher, it is a worthy death. I will remember this hatred forever. Tianshu's expression was resolute as he growled in a firm tone. As soon as he finished speaking, he took out 5 communication jade slips and issued orders to the 5 temporary commanders. Order all the warships and all the soldiers to take action immediately to intercept the meteor. Chapter 27-22. No one in the Heaven Punisher race knew what had happened to the golden meteor. Even Yun Shuiyan, who was the strongest and had the highest status, did not believe that it was Ji Tianxing's doing. However, she was certain that the golden meteor's attack was not an accident. It must have something to do with Ji Tianxing. Reality proved that she had guessed correctly. The shining golden meteor was indeed a complete star. Moreover, Ji Tianxing had spent a few months to find it in the Heaven Punisher star zone. Back then, he had discovered that the Heaven Punisher fleets from various worlds had retreated with large amounts of resources, so he had decided to head straight for planet Heaven Punisher. However, he was alone and weak. He only had a few helpers and 4 divine beasts. Even if Ji Wuhan and Ji Wushuang were included, they only had 10 true god experts. How could 10 true god experts exterminate 30 billion Heaven Punishers and destroy the entire planet Heaven Punisher? That was an impossible mission. Fortunately, Ji Tianxing had expected this day to come. Back then, when he had traversed through the void and traversed through various major star zones, he had encountered countless void storms, folded spaces, and black holes. He had also discovered countless planets with abundant resources. Moreover, he had refined dozens of planets and increased the power of the 5 elements world by nearly 10 times. At that time, he had already thought of a plan. In the Heaven Punisher star zone, he had found a planet with a diameter of 100 million miles. This planet contained abundant metal resources and was extremely hard and sturdy. Ji Tianxing did not refine this planet. Instead, he used the power of the 5 elements world to drag the planet away. He controlled the 5 elements world to drag the metal planet and stop 600 million miles away from planet Heaven Punisher. The 5 elements world stopped in the void. Then he used the power of the 5 elements world to push the metal planet toward planet Heaven Punisher. The golden power of the 5 elements world enveloped the planet, causing it to shine with golden light like a golden meteor. Under Ji Tianxing's push, the golden meteor continued to accelerate and crash toward planet Heaven Punisher with unstoppable momentum. This was the first step of Ji Tianxing's plan. He called it the Meteor Plan. Once the plan succeeded, the meteor would collide with the Heaven Punishing star, and the consequences would be catastrophic. Not only would the divine light barrier of planet Heaven Trader crumble, but the entire planet would also welcome its doomsday, and all life would be plunged into misery and suffering. That way, Ji Tianxing would be able to kill 10 billion Heaven Punishers without using a single soldier and plunge the entire planet Heaven Punisher into chaos. This plan was very bold and sinister. Yunyao Jiku Bai Long and the others exclaimed in shock after they learned about Ji Tianxing's idea. Everyone believed that the Heaven Punishers would not be able to guard against them and would not be able to do anything. The meteor plan would definitely succeed. After all, in the entire trichiliocosm, Ji Tianxing was the only one who could control the power of the world and control the stars. He was the only one who could carry out the meteor plan and accomplish such a magnificent feat. At this moment, the golden meteor was speeding through the void and was still accelerating. No one knew that there was a handsome young man in a white robe standing on the golden meteor. He was none other than Ji Tianxing. He stood in the turbulent golden light and stared at planet Heaven Punisher, which was 300 million miles away, with a cold smile on his face. The meteor plan is only the first step of my plan. After this, I will carry out the second step of the plan. Then I will give you an even bigger surprise. Ji Tianxing's heart was filled with anticipation as he thought of this. He raised his palms and released a vast amount of the power of the world, which he infused into the golden light. It's not fast enough. I have to go faster. Only when it's fast enough, the impact will be more powerful, and the destructive power will be even more terrifying. As time passed, the golden meteor continued to accelerate. At the same time, the distance between the meteor and planet Heaven Punisher continued to shorten. 300 million miles, 200 million miles, 100 million miles, 150 million miles. However, the power of the world in Ji Tianxing's body was getting weaker and weaker. When the meteor was 100 million miles away from planet Heaven Punisher, his power of the world was finally exhausted. With his current strength, he could only store so much power of the world. He had already tried his best. The 5 elements world stopped in the void a few 100 million miles away. It was too far away from him. He could not draw on the power of the 5 elements world to continue accelerating the meteor. However, he was already satisfied with this speed. Although the meteor is still 100 million miles away from planet Heaven Punisher, I can't accelerate it anymore. However, the meteor will continue to crash into planet Heaven Punisher under the terrifying inertia. Even if its speed will decrease, it will not be a big deal. Planet Heaven Punisher will not be able to escape this disaster. Ji Tianqing looked at Planet Heaven Punisher with bright eyes, and a cold smile appeared on his face. However, the next moment, the smile on his face disappeared. He suddenly saw a purple light that covered the sky in the dark void in front of him. What is that? The army of the Heaven Punisher? He immediately frowned and observed the purple light with a sharp gaze. It should be the army of the Heaven Punisher. After all, the Heaven Punisher has already withdrawn their defenses and is guarding planet Heaven Punisher. This meteor is so huge and so dazzling in the void. The Heaven Punisher must have discovered it long ago. Ji Tianqing observed for a while and saw that the purple light that covered the sky was an endless number of battleships. However, he was not worried at all. This result was also within his expectations. Idiots of the Heaven Punisher. Even if they send out millions of troops, what's the use? How can those battleships stop this huge meteor? They are simply sending themselves to their deaths. Ji Tianqing muttered to himself as a look of contempt flashed across his eyes. Very quickly, for hours passed. The distance between the meteor and planet Heaven Punisher was shortened to 50 million miles. At this moment, the 100,000 battleships finally arrived and were about to collide with the meteor. Ji Tianqing stood at the top of the meteor and clearly saw that the 100,000 battleships were divided into 5 large fleets that were arranged in a triangular formation. Each fleet had 20,000 battleships. When they gathered together, they covered 1,000,000 miles of the void and were extremely powerful. However, no matter how big the fleets were, they were not worth mentioning when compared to the meteor that was 100 million miles in diameter. The difference between the two was like a millstone and a cockroach. No matter how powerful a cockroach was and how determined it was to die, it would not be able to move a millstone. Soon the first fleet met the meteor. This was the Southern Expedition Fleet, led by Lord Jiu Tianchu's cousin. When the fleet was 100,000 miles away from the meteor, Lord Jiu shouted at the top of his lungs and gave the order to attack. All soldiers, listen to my command. Attack the meteor with all your might, no matter the cost. For the glory of our race and for the 30 billion people of our race, we will die with no regrets. His solemn and resolute roar was transmitted to the 20,000 battleships through a special array. In an instant, the 2 million soldiers of the Heaven Punisher were united. They were ready to die and released their most powerful divine cannons. Chapter 27-23. Boom! 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 Tens of thousands of dazzling purple light beams tore through the dark sky like lightning and shot toward the golden meteor. The light beams that were as dense as raindrops created light shadows that were tens of thousands of miles long in the sky. It was extremely dazzling. Not only that, but the 20,000 captains in golden armor also flew out of the battleships. They held divine weapons in their hands and unleashed the strongest divine power in their lives. They used all kinds of trump cards and forbidden divine powers to attack the golden meteor. After all, it was like throwing an egg against a rock. They would definitely die. Then they would die even more brilliantly. Before they died, they unleashed all the forbidden divine powers that they had never used before, and all kinds of consummate skills that would consume their lifespan and cultivation power. 2 breaths later, the divine spell light shadows, sword radiance, and tens of thousands of purple light beams all hit the golden meteor. Boom! 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 Earth-shattering sounds exploded in the sky and shook 1,000,000 miles. The terrifying sound waves formed visible ripples that caused countless heaven-punishing soldiers to bleed from their orifices. Even the captains in the martial god realm were dizzy from the shock. In the blink of an eye, the divine spell light shadows and tens of thousands of purple light beams all collapsed. The sacred golden light that enveloped the meteor also splashed out golden fragments that covered the sky and earth. Billions of purple and golden fragments mixed together and created a hurricane that swept across 1,000,000 miles of the sky. Such a destructive shockwave caused countless battleships to sway from side to side. However, before the soldiers could take control of the battleships and get into formation, Before they could attack again and release the powerful divine cannons, the golden meteor had already arrived and quickly crushed the entire fleet. Boom! Boom! In just 10 breaths, the 20,000 battleships were crushed one after another and all of them collapsed. The battleships exploded and turned into tens of thousands of pieces that scattered in the sky. The soldiers hiding in the battleships were also smashed into pieces of flesh and blood. They were mixed with the pieces of the battleships and scattered in the sky. The 20,000 battleships and 2 million soldiers turned into pieces that covered 1,000,000 miles of the sky. However, in the blink of an eye, the debris that blotted out the sky was burned to ashes by the sacred golden light, turning into fine powder and dust that drifted in the void. The entire southern expedition fleet was annihilated. From the martial sage realm warriors to the 9th Wangya, who was a level 4 true god realm warrior, they had all perished in the void. They had suffered such heavy losses in such a short period of time. This was something that had never happened in the history of the heaven-punishing clan. It could be said to be the greatest tragedy in history. Moreover, the sacrifice of 2 million heaven-conquering soldiers did not achieve much in return. The divine golden light that enveloped the meteor was still surging and dazzling. The speed of the golden meteor didn't change much. It didn't slow down at all. In the void millions of miles away, Sky Pivot's Black Dragon warship was following behind the two fleets, flying towards the meteor. Tianshu and Yun Shuayan stood at the bow of the ship, staring at the rapidly approaching golden meteor with grave expressions. The mother and son witnessed the tragic scene of the destruction of the Southern Expedition fleet with their own eyes. Their hearts were filled with shock, and their eyes were filled with deep disappointment. They had not expected the power of the golden meteor to be so terrifying. 2 million soldiers of the heaven-punishing clan had been so easily crushed and turned into ashes in an instant. However, the sacrifice of the soldiers was in vain, and the speed of the golden meteor did not slow down. This made the mother and son's hearts clench, and deep worry appeared on their faces. 100 breaths later, two majestic fleets met the meteor head-on. They were the Eastern Expedition Fleet and the Western Expedition Fleet. 40,000 warships and 4 million soldiers of the heaven-punishing clan were divided into two square formations, one on the left and the other on the right. They charged towards the golden meteor fearlessly. When the two sides were 100,000 miles apart, the two temporary commanders roared hoarsely and gave the order to all the soldiers to attack. Immediately, the 40,000 warships used up all their divine stones and released the most dazzling and powerful divine cannons. Nearly 100,000 dark purple light beams rained down on the meteor like a rain of arrows that blotted out the sky. The 40,000 captains in golden armor did not hesitate to burn their divine bodies and their lifelong skills as they charged fearlessly towards the golden meteor. In the next instant, the 100,000 light beams hit the golden meteor one after another. The 40,000 captains were also like moths to a flame. They released their last brilliance and exploded with their strongest power to hit the golden meteor. Boom, 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 boom. A series of earth-shattering noises burst out and converged into a terrifying sound wave that shook the void 3 million miles away. Millions of soldiers were bleeding from their 7 orifices and seeing stars. Their consciousness was blurry and confused. However, this did not stop the 40,000 warships from increasing their speed to the maximum and crashing into the golden meteor. Boom! Another earth-shattering noise was heard. Batch after batch of warships, like black ants, collided head-on with the golden meteors. Then they were smashed into billions of pieces by the golden meteor. The scene of the Southern Expedition fleet being destroyed was replayed in the void again. However, the scene this time was even more dazzling and magnificent. A total of 40,000 warships and 4 million soldiers of the heaven-punishing clan were instantly smashed into pieces and killed. The space within a radius of 3 million miles was now covered in metal shreds and broken pieces of flesh. Then the golden meteor smashed through. The surging divine golden light was like a world-destroying divine flame, burning all the debris into powder. The void within a 3 million mile radius was also cleansed and became clean. The Eastern and Western expeditionary fleets were destroyed just like that. On the Black Dragon warship, Tianshu and Yun Shuayan witnessed this tragic scene with their own eyes. Their expressions were extremely gloomy and their hearts were bleeding. Fortunately, the sacrifice of the 4 million soldiers of the heaven-punishing clan finally paid off and showed their worth. A huge gap was blasted open in the sacred golden light that enveloped the meteor. The gap was 1,000,000 miles wide and the golden light inside was thin. Through the gap, one could clearly see the uneven surface of the star that was covered with metal and rocks. Moreover, the speed of the golden meteor had obviously slowed down. The facts proved that Tian Shu and Yun Shuyan's decision was right. The mother and son both looked relieved and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. The remaining Northern Expedition Fleet and the Guardian Fleet were also overjoyed, and their morale was greatly boosted when they saw the meteor slowing down. After all, they were going to die without a doubt. If their deaths were worthwhile and meaningful, then they would be satisfied. Therefore, the two fleets desperately accelerated and bravely rushed toward the golden meteor like moths to a flame. At the peak of the meteor, Ji Tianqing could not help but frown when he saw this scene. Damn it! The sacrifice of millions of soldiers of the heaven-punishing clan slowed down the meteor after all. My power of the realm has been exhausted, so I can't accelerate the meteor or manipulate it to change its direction. It can only rely on inertia to hit the heaven-punishing clan. After its speed is reduced, its destructive power is also greatly reduced. You're tuning in to the Li Mei Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.